Chapter 1567. For the Ocean Emperor to look so serious, it was easy to imagine his identity. Before coming here, Yi Zichen had already learned a few things from the Ocean Emperor. However, he hadn't explained too much. All he told Yi Zichen was to return to the Sea of Innocence, and that his clone would tell him what was going on. That's why Yi Zichen and the others had traveled through the night without stopping to get to the Sea of Innocence. He wanted to learn more about him from the Ocean Emperor's clone. Earlier, the Ocean Emperor said a few things about him, but he didn't want to divulge too much, so he told us to come find you. Yi Zichen's eyes flashed with seriousness. He's actually a demon, is that right? The Ocean Emperor's clone didn't respond right away. Instead, he took a sip of his tea. I can't divulge too much about him to the outside world, but that's only natural. If outsiders learn of this, they'll be in an uproar. Our Sea of Innocence might even be viewed as traitors of the god race. He naturally wouldn't dare divulge too much. The Sea of Innocence will be viewed as traitors of the god race? Yi Zichen arched his brows. Yang Jian and the others were stunned as well. They didn't quite dare believe the clone's words. The Sea of Innocence represented the Northern Divine Mountain. There had been 9 divine mountains since the dawn of humanity in the primordial era. As the Northern Divine Mountain's holy land, the Sea of Innocence had always been a model for the other divine mountains. The various cities of the divine mountains were managed in an orderly fashion. The Sea of Innocence's emperors had always been loyal to the God Emperor. During this period of time, there had never been any rebellious thoughts. Only when it came to Zhou Wu's generation, the God Emperor was heartless, causing many heroes to rise up. If it wasn't for him being too ruthless, the other divine mountains' monarchs wouldn't have parted ways with him. But now the Ocean Emperor's clone was saying that the Sea of Innocence might be viewed as traitors. If Yi Zichen wasn't mistaken, the person they were talking about was something from the previous emperor's era. "Why do you say that, Ocean Emperor?" asked Yi Zichen in confusion. "In truth, this is a secret of our Shui family. The only people who truly know about him are me and my true body, as well as the clan's grand elders. In other words, they're from my father's generation." The Ocean Emperor sighed deeply and shook her head. "Actually, we want to bring this matter to our graves. You can see it for yourself. I don't have any sons, only 3 daughters." Yi Zichen nodded. Indeed, the Sea Emperor of the Sea of Innocence had no male heirs. He only had 3 princesses. There's no need to say anything more about Bei Bei. His temperament isn't suitable to inherit the position of the Imperial Lord. Mo is chivalrous and doesn't like to be bound. It's not good for her to inherit. Moreover, you also know that Mo is the child of this deity and the Jade Lake Palace Master. The Jade Lake Palace Master has no children, and the future Jade Lake also needs Mo to inherit. In that case, Hong Hong will be the only one who can assume the position of Sea Emperor in the future. She will definitely be informed of this matter. Yi Zichen nodded. "You have a close relationship with Hong Hong." Yi Zichen couldn't help but blush. His relationship with Hong Hong had been exposed when he formed the Emperor's Celestial Eye. At the time, he was still unconscious, and only Pu Jingwan had told him the details. However, the great emperors present at the time had all noticed the romantic relationship between him and Shui Hong Hong. He'd clearly wanted to find a suitable opportunity to reveal this, but he hadn't expected to reveal it to the world in such a manner. But Yi Zichen didn't quite understand. Earlier, Shui Hong Hong had said she'd give him 10 years, but she'd said she'd marry someone else in the future. If Shui Hong Hong was the Sea Emperor's first successor, the Sea Emperor shouldn't have interfered with her feelings. "Sea Emperor, did Hong Hong only think of inheriting the throne recently, or have you always wanted to?" "Why do you ask?" asked the Sea Emperor. Yi Zichen laughed, then repeated what Shui Hong Hong had told him, from the time they'd gotten together to the time they'd promised to marry each other. The Sea Emperor nodded. At the time, I did indeed want to marry her off to someone else. It was also to solidify the Sea of Innocence's position as a holy land of the northern divine mountain. However, after her bloodline awakened, that idea faded. Passing the throne to her was only a recent thought. When she said this, the Sea Emperor didn't seem the slightest bit embarrassed. Using their children as marriage partners was all too common for emperors like them. I see, Yi Zichen nodded. Don't try to change the topic. Let's not talk about the awakening of Reddy's bloodline. Let's talk about the fact that you, the Emperor's star, are related to our Reddy. My main body and I won't stop the two of you from interacting. The Ocean Sovereign spoke casually, but her words revealed the importance of a well-matched family. The Emperor's star. If Shui Honghong's bloodline hadn't awakened, Yi Zichen's status as the Emperor's star would have been enough to marry the Sea Emperor's daughter. But if Yi Zichen wasn't, then she had to reconsider. At the end of the day, no matter how brilliant the Ocean Empress was, she couldn't be immune. That's not it. The Ocean Sovereign changed the topic and brought it back to him. If you ask Hong Hong about him, she won't hide it from you. That's why my main body and I decided to tell you about this. Otherwise, even if you're the Emperor's star, for the sake of the Sea of Innocence's saint Ming, no matter what you say, we won't tell you these things. The Ocean Sovereign explained why he and his main body had decided to tell Yi Zichen about this. What he'd said wasn't without reason. Although he hadn't interacted with Shui Honghong much, he was confident that if he asked her, she'd tell him everything he wanted to know. Perhaps she'd hesitate, but she'd definitely tell him. This was how women behaved in front of their loved ones. They wouldn't hide anything from their loved ones. Rather than wait for Shui Honghong to tell them, the Ocean Emperor and the others might as well tell them themselves. That way, they could control the amount of information they revealed. They knew what they could and couldn't say. Then please tell me, Ocean Emperor. Yi Zichen cupped his hands in respect. News about that person was extremely important to Yi Zichen. As he spoke, the Ocean Emperor's clone raised his cup of tea and downed it. It was obvious that telling him about that person was no small amount of pressure. Otherwise, as the Ocean Emperor of the Sea of Innocence, he wouldn't have gone this far. The Ocean Sovereign poured herself more than 3 cups of wine and drank it. His actions stirred Yi Zichen and the others' hearts. They all wondered what kind of shocking news the Ocean Emperor would reveal in a moment. Ocean Emperor, said Yi Zichen, unable to restrain himself. Chapter 1568. Within the Shui family's dungeons. Most people knew that there were soldiers standing guard around every cell to prevent a prison break or a prisoner from escaping on their own. However, this sort of problem had never occurred in the Shui family of the Sea of Innocence. When Yi Zichen entered the dungeons through Shuibei, he'd wondered why there weren't any soldiers around. Even if there were clansmen, they only circled the dungeons in 2s and 3s before leaving. Since he'd been focused on punishing Bai Yulong, he hadn't paid much attention to this problem. Now that he thought about it, he couldn't help but be puzzled. That was until he heard an explanation from the Sea Emperor's clone. The Shui family generally didn't imprison prisoners on death row. After capturing intruders, they generally locked them up for a limited time. During that time, the Shui family wouldn't treat them unfairly, nor would they seal their divine power so they couldn't cultivate. When the time was up, they'd naturally release them. Prisoners easily accepted this method of handling things. The ones who'd sent people to steal the Shui family's secrets were in the wrong, so they were already relieved that they hadn't been executed. Naturally, they wouldn't send anyone else to break into the dungeons. The Shui family's way of handling things made Yi Zichen suddenly see the light. Sometimes, executing spies really wasn't the best way to deal with them. Dealing with them would only worsen the conflict between the two sides, and more problems would arise. But if he locked them up properly, for a few hundred years or even a few decades, not only would he be able to answer to his clansmen, but the spy would also be useless during that time. Once the time was up, he'd be released back to his clan, and he'd remember how well the Shui family treated him. In the future, even if he went on a mission, he wouldn't choose the Shui family. He might even tell his clansmen not to come. As for escaping, there was even less to worry about. This dungeon looked ordinary, but it was the former emperor's blood, sweat, and tears. Even the former demon emperor couldn't leave, let alone the other demon generals, Yao generals, and divine generals. "Great sage, just wait for us outside," Yifutian said. They arrived outside the Shui family's dungeon. The Sea Emperor's clone hadn't come with them. Instead, she'd given him a token that allowed him to open the dungeon's entrance. Alright. The great sage hesitated for a moment, then nodded after a moment's thought. During their conversation, Yi Zichen and the Sea Emperor's clone gained some understanding of the Demon Emperor's personality. The Ocean Empress, in particular, made it clear that she was very hostile to the demon race. The reason they went down to the third level of the dungeon was to communicate with the Demon Emperor. He had to avoid any factors that would affect his mood as much as possible. "I will stay here and wait for you. If anything happens, I will immediately go in and find you." Yi Zichen nodded, then glanced at Yang Jian and Pu Jingwan. After exchanging glances, he took out his token, opened the cell's seal, and entered. When Yi Zichen and company stepped into the cell, all the prisoners on the first floor looked towards the door. The people on the first floor were all normal criminals. They had been imprisoned for a relatively short period of time. Of course, their realms were relatively low. Most of them were not dominators yet. Although Yi Zichen and the others didn't intentionally release their auras, the prisoners could still sense their extraordinariness. When Yang Jian and the others looked over, the prisoners instinctively averted their gazes, not daring to meet their gaze at all. Crash! At this moment, the sound of iron chains colliding suddenly came from the corner of the first floor's prison cell. The sound of the collision was very intense, and soon after, a heart-wrenching roar could be heard. "Yi Zichen, I'm going to kill you!" Yi Zichen, who was about to descend to the second floor, stopped. Yang Jian and the others looked towards the corner and saw a man who was completely different from the other prisoners. His skin was split open, and his long, filthy hair covered his face. Through his unbound hair, they could vaguely see a hint of red in his eyes. The other prisoners looked over, but when they saw him, they looked away and pretended they hadn't seen anything. He was the only prisoner to suffer in the Shui family's dungeons. This prisoner would be taken care of by the Shui family every 2 or 3 days. From time to time, some lecherous men would be imprisoned in his place. His hoarse roar could be heard almost day and night on the first floor of the dungeon. The prisoners were all wondering what crime this man had committed before he was sent here for him to receive such treatment. They'd always had a good impression of the Shui family. It wasn't until this man entered the dungeon that they realized the Shui family wasn't benevolent to just anyone. "I think they're the ones who locked him up." Suddenly, the prisoner turned to Yi Zichen and spoke in a trembling voice. The others looked over, then lowered their heads. They were afraid Yi Zichen would target them and turn them into the man in the corner. "Yi Zichen, if you have the guts, kill me!" The prisoner's arms and ankles were shackled in chains, and he was still shouting at the top of his lungs. Yang Jian narrowed his eyes and watched him for a while. "Yi, this kid seems to be the one we brought over from the Bai family. Is that so?" Yi Zichen smiled indifferently, then slowly walked towards the prisoner's cell. The Shui family's cells were made up of independent barriers of light. The other prisoners lived within them. Although their range of movement was restricted, they could still be considered free. They ate, drank, and bathed every day. However, as soon as they got close, they could smell a pungent stench. His hands and feet were shackled with chains, each with a metal ball in the middle. With his divine power sealed, he couldn't lift the metal ball at all. All he could do was kneel on the ground and crawl like a rabid dog. "Hey, Bai Yulong, you're living quite well." When he saw the prisoner, all of Yi Zichen's pity vanished. He'd never forget what Bai Yulong had done to Shui Mo. Even now, she lay unconscious in bed. If it weren't for the fact that Yi Zichen wanted to wait until Shuemo woke up to get her revenge himself, he would have killed Bai Yulong 100 times over. Yi Zichen, if you have the guts, kill me. Only then did Yi Zichen realize that Bai Yulong's teeth had been shattered. Shui Beibei couldn't possibly have done something like this. If he was right, it had to be Anti-Upheaval's brothers. The floor he crawled on was covered in soft fur. It seemed they didn't want Bai Yulong to die. Yi Zichen snorted as he watched the metal ball drag Bai Yulong along the ground. His lips curled into a heart-chilling, cruel smile. You want to die? Don't even think about it. Enjoy. Kill me. Otherwise, if my father finds out, he'll absolutely avenge me, roared Bai Yulong. Yi Zichen sneered, but his expression froze. He instinctively glanced at Yang Jian. Chapter 1569. Bai Haoyu had entered the Upheaval Alliance's headquarters entirely because of Yang Jian. Yi Zichen naturally had absolute trust in Yang Jian. He'd said Bai Haoyu was on his side, so Yi Zichen didn't think too much of it. Then they encountered the River Styx. Yi Zichen led the Upheaval Alliance to their aid, but Bai Haoyu wasn't with them. If he was right, Bai Haoyu was at the Upheaval Alliance's headquarters. Yi Zichen glanced at Yang Jian. He'd been rushing between the River Styx and the Fox Clan, but he'd never heard of Bai Haoyu's situation. I don't know the specifics either. Yang Jian narrowed his eyes and transmitted. When Bai Haoyu was with me in the Lightning Emperor's manor, he gave me quite a bit of useful information. Back when I was a spy, I had time to mention you guys. He was the one who created the opportunity for me. When the Lightning Emperor wanted to deal with me, he spoke up for me. Then, we fought our way out of the Lightning Emperor's inner courtyard. Although Yang Jian's words were vague, Yi Zichen could roughly tell that the two of them, they were friends who'd gone through life and death together. With this kind of friendship, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that Bai Haoyu was on Yang Jian's side when they escaped. But I can't be completely sure about him. I can't see through him. I suggest you don't trust him completely. Didn't Xiao Yumei already return to the Upheaval Alliance? Tell her to keep an eye on him. I already told Yumei, said Pu Jingwan, waving her phone. Yi Zichen hadn't expected Pu Jingwan, who'd been so busy all this time, to think ahead of him. He nodded at her, then glanced at Bai Yulong. Yang Jian snorted. Who cares? I've known Bai Haoyu for so long, but I've never heard him mention his son. Besides, Bai Haoyu's cultivation is indeed high, but he might not be our match. In the face of absolute strength, all schemes are useless. As soon as he finished speaking, Yang Jian kicked Bai Yulong. Behave yourself. If you keep barking, I'll have my howling celestial dog keep you company. Yi Zichen and the others turned around indifferently and headed for the second floor. Bai Yulong's future was already set in stone. Or perhaps it was more accurate to say that he had no future at all. With Shui Beibei and the others around, Bai Yulong's future wouldn't be easy. Once Shui Mo woke up, it would be even harder for him to escape death. Even if Shui Mo didn't attack him, Yi Zichen and his comrades couldn't let Bai Yulong live another day. The second level of the dungeon was much more oppressive than the first. The prisoners here were all general-level experts. The pitch-black dungeon was illuminated by the wall fires on the surrounding walls. There were also several bonfires burning with divine power around the cells that were covered by light barriers. You again. When he stepped into the second floor of the dungeon, a chuckle could be heard in the quiet second floor. When Yi Zichen heard that, he looked over and saw that the speaker was none other than the cyan-robed Yao expert he'd met earlier. This expert seemed to be a heavy drinker. He had been drinking the last time he came back, and he was still drinking now. You're not an ordinary person either, kid. Before, you seemed to have just stepped into the Deva realm, but now your aura seems to be even stronger than that of an ordinary sovereign. And yet, you're still not in the sovereign realm. How strange. The cyan-robed expert shook his head and drank. When Yi Zichen heard this, he smiled kindly. Compared to you, I'm still far behind. I wouldn't dare boast, but I've seen quite a few major experts. You and those Emperor-level experts feel pretty much the same as I do. When Yi Zichen first arrived, he hadn't sensed it too clearly. Now that his cultivation had increased, he could sense auras more accurately. The azure-robed demonic race mighty figure in front of him was definitely not as simple as the ordinary divine generals imprisoned here. Just from the size of his barrier and the location of his cell, he was clearly no ordinary person. You really know how to talk, kid. How could I possibly dare compare to those major experts? You're just a puny Yao divine general. If I'm stronger than them, it's just that my Yao divine power is more concentrated. I wouldn't even dare hope to compare to major experts. The cyan-robed expert smiled calmly. Did you come back prepared to go to the third floor? Senior, you're wise. Yi Zichen cupped his hands in greeting. The first time you came here, I guessed you'd definitely go to the third floor. The cyan-robed expert chuckled. From the look of it, he wasn't trying to trick Yi Zichen. Rather, he really had guessed Yi Zichen would go to the third floor. Yi Zichen couldn't help but be shocked. When he went to the third floor, he'd been completely curious. After that, he'd thought it over and decided he absolutely had to understand the situation there. As soon as the Yao expert laid eyes on him, he was completely convinced that Yi Zichen would go to the third floor. Now that he thought about it, it was a bit metaphysical. He stretched lazily, then tilted his head and looked past Yi Zichen. Let me see. Last time you went to the third floor, you had a Yao expert with you, didn't you? The one down there really hates Yao. TCH, you're smart this time. You knew you didn't bring any Yao with you. What, did you ask the Ocean Emperor? She told you not to bring any Yao here? Buddy, I'm getting more and more curious about you. For the Ocean Emperor to tell you all this, you really are extraordinary. Senior, you praise me too much. Yi Zichen cupped his hands and smiled. For you to say all this, you're extraordinary as well. Ha 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 ha. The cyan-robed expert laughed heartily. No matter how extraordinary I am, I'm still nothing but the Ocean Emperor's prisoner. Unlike you guys, who can enjoy yourselves in the outside world, you can only drink and drink in this tiny space. Day and night, you have to endure that old bastard's torment. Come to think of it, the Ocean Emperor really is evil. She interrogated me on her own accord and used a prisoner to deal with a prisoner. The cyan-robed expert laughed bitterly and drank. He was right in front of the passageway to the third floor. The aura of the demon overlord imprisoned on the third floor of the dungeon would constantly invade him, but this beastkin race master seemed to have been locked up here for a long time. Being able to resist the pressure of the demon overlord without his sea of consciousness collapsing, his realm was probably at the overlord level. Even if he wasn't an emperor, he was at least an emperor. But that also meant, the last time he was here, the demon emperor had been so furious because the great sage was present. This time, the great sage was waiting outside. Perhaps they really might be able to go down and talk to the demon emperor. That wasn't entirely impossible. Just as Yi Zichen was fantasizing about getting the information he wanted from the demon emperor, or perhaps achieving some of his goals, the cyan-robed expert suddenly set his jug of wine on the table. Although I don't want to dampen your spirits, I suggest you don't go down there. Senior, you mean? Chapter 1570. The instant Yi Zichen released his aura, Yang Jian and Pu Jingwan took half a step forward at practically the same time, helping Yi Zichen resist it. Zhang Xian looked over. The prisoners in the cells were also surging with divine power. Many of them even prostrated on the ground. However, the green-robed beastkin expert calmly raised the wine pot and drank, as if he was not affected by the pressure at all. This azure-robed demon was definitely a peerless expert. Although Yang Jian and Pu Jingwan had blocked it in time, Yi Zichen was still affected by the pressure for an instant. In that instant, he felt the blood energy in his body surge, and his divine power was in chaos. When he looked at Yang Jian and Pu Jingwan's expressions, he saw that even at their realms, they seemed to find it hard to resist. The green-robed demon clan expert was the closest to the third floor of the dungeon. He did not release his divine power to resist, but he was not affected at all. This kind of performance was enough to prove too much. The old demon emperor's rampage lasted for 100 breaths. When the rampaging aura dissipated, Yang Jian and Pu Jingwan retreated. Although they said nothing, Yi Zichen could see that their faces were pale. I really couldn't tell that you have so many experts by your side. The cyan-robed Yao nodded repeatedly, then looked Yang Jian and Pu Jingwan up and down. They are all sovereign emperors. However, they look somewhat unfamiliar. It looks like they are geniuses that appeared in the past 10,000 years. Since he said that, it meant that the green-robed demon had been imprisoned here for 10,000 years. 10,000 years. What kind of concept was that? It hadn't even been 10,000 years since Yi Zichen was born during the Yellow Emperor's era. Yang Jian and Pu Jingwan both stealthily adjusted their breathing. The old Devil Emperor's aura wasn't as easy to resist as they'd imagined. He was one of the longest living figures of the Third Era. When he was still a demon emperor, he was already a leading figure. Tens of thousands of years had passed, so his cultivation level must have risen even more. Yi Zichen stealthily handed Yang Jian and Pu Jingwan a pill, then smiled and cupped his fists at the blue-robed expert. Senior, this junior doesn't seem to have introduced myself. Yi Zichen. You're suddenly being so polite to me. Do you have something to ask of me? After living for tens of thousands of years, even a demon without spiritual wisdom would become a spirit, let alone a green-robed demon master who had long transformed. When he saw Yi Zichen cup his hands and address him as a junior, then introduce himself, the Yao expert sensed that something was amiss. The demon race expert chuckled and did not return the greeting. He simply leaned against the light barrier with a smile in his eyes. Yang Jian and Pu Jingwan could sense that this Yao expert was different from the rest. They said nothing, and simply stood quietly by Yi Zichen's side. Senior, you're wise. He cupped his hands towards the demon and said, May I know why Senior has been imprisoned here for 10,000 years? As far as this junior knows, the Shui family has never imprisoned a prisoner for 10,000 years. Why not? Isn't it right down there? The green-robed fiend race expert gestured towards the third floor of the dungeon and said, You're quite smart, little guy. When I said that the people around you had risen in the past 10,000 years, I knew that I had been locked up here for 10,000 years. Stretching lazily, the green-robed beastkin simply lay directly on the bed. Don't beat around the bush. I don't like these complicated things. Just tell me what you want to ask me. I like you very much. If I want to tell you, I will naturally tell you. Then I won't beat around the bush. I just want to know, will we be able to descend to the third floor in the near future? Asked Yi Zichen. Of course. The azure-robed demon expert nodded. If you want to, you can go down now. Didn't that person below stop his rampage? However, I'm afraid that he will suddenly erupt again. You guys won't be able to withstand it even with a layer of restriction. If you go down, I'm afraid that all of you will die there. Li, you're right. That's exactly what I'm worried about. That's why I asked you to show me the way, said Yi Zichen. You really think too highly of me. The azure-robed demon raised an eyebrow. You should know something about the person down there, right? How could I possibly control that person's temper? You can only try your luck. However, don't go down there for the next few days. He's been going crazy for no apparent reason. He's already gone berserk several times. Yi. Yang Jian subconsciously sent a transmission to Yi Zichen. After all, they'd come here to communicate with the old demon emperor. The azure-robed expert said they couldn't go down there for the time being. Even if they did, they'd have to try their luck. It was just as the Yao expert had said. Who could say for sure when the demon emperor would settle down? Was he going to come here every day? just now. In order to resist the Demon Emperor's pressure, which lasted no more than 100 breaths, Yang Jian had almost opened his eye of the heavens. Who could say for sure how long the Demon Emperor's pressure would last? If he was tortured like this every day, Yang Jian was afraid his divine sea would collapse. Sensing Yang Jian's gaze, Yi Zichen reached out and gestured for him to calm down. Then he turned to the azure-robed expert and cupped his hands in greeting. Senior, could I trouble you to tell me when Emperor Hades will settle down a bit? That's no problem at all, but as you know, prisoners don't have transmission slips. How am I supposed to send you a message? As you can see, Yao Sense can't leave this place, said the azure-robed expert. That's easy. Yi Zichen smiled, then waved the medallion in his hand. This is the medallion the Ocean Emperor gave me. It should be able to open the seals around you. I'll give you an artifact that can help you contact me. How about that? Aren't you afraid I'll just run? Asked the azure-robed Yao. I'm not afraid. Yi Zichen shrugged. As you can see, my two best friends aren't mediocre at all. Besides, this is the Shui family estate. Even if they don't have an inescapable net, I'm afraid it's no different. How could you possibly run? Furthermore, it doesn't seem like you're planning to run. Kid, you're interesting. The azure-robed Yao nodded and smiled. But why would I help you for no reason at all? We're just acquaintances. I just wanted to chat with you because we had an affinity for each other. Senior, whatever you want, I can satisfy you, said Yi Zichen straightforwardly. Are you sure? The Yao's eyes lit up. Of course. Divine constitution-strengthening pills, exotic delicacies, bejeweled nectar, whatever you need, I'll give it to you with both hands. Yi Zichen laughed. He could tell that this Yao was a big drinker. It just so happened that he had quite a few rare wines he'd obtained from all over the world. If this Yao could help him solve his current predicament, he'd give them all to him. Who would have thought? I don't want any of that. The Yao laughed. I want a precious artifact. A precious artifact. Yi Zichen had thought of countless things this expert might want, but he'd never considered a precious artifact. He was currently being held captive here. So what if they gave him a peerless divine artifact? Could it be that this Yao expert was about to be released soon? Shui Yang had already taken all his treasures, so he wanted to use Yi Zichen to re-equip himself? Although Yi Zichen could be considered wealthy, this Yao expert was no ordinary person. He might not even be interested in the divine artifacts he possessed. Chapter 1571. It was hard to imagine that the green-robed expert, who'd been grinning wickedly just moments ago, was now staring at Yi Zichen with eyes full of desire. If you looked closely, you could see that he was gulping, his throat moving up and down. Yi Zichen couldn't help but feel a chill run down his spine. Yang Jian's expression was strange as well. A precious artifact? Pu Jingwan rested her chin on her hand and looked Yi Zichen up and down for a while, then glanced at the blue-robed Yao. Finally, her gaze landed on Yi Zichen's body. For some reason, her gaze fell on a rather strange spot, and she shuddered and rubbed her arms. She took a few steps back in disgust, but the green-robed expert acted as if he hadn't noticed. He looked at Yi Zichen greedily and licked his lip. What do you think? So long as you agree, I'll help you. Hey, you're not going to agree, are you? There's no need, is there? Are you willing to throw away your dignity for something so trivial? Pu Jingwan furrowed her brows. Yi Zichen naturally saw Pu Jingwan's look of disgust. He also knew very well what this girl, whose brain circuit was not quite normal, was thinking in her heart. The precious artifact the Yao expert mentioned was obviously an ordinary divine artifact. Only a Fujoshi like Pu Jingwan could think like that. She was a Fujoshi. If her thoughts weren't racing, then they were racing. Big Sister Pu, can you retract your divine abilities? Yi Zichen rolled his eyes speechlessly. Yang Jian, however, didn't quite understand what Pu Jingwan and Yi Zichen were talking about. Yang Jian, are you an idiot? Come over here and I'll explain. Yang Jian obediently scooted over and started listening to Pu Jingwan's brainwashing. As they conversed, Yi Zichen saw Yang Jian glance at him several times, his eyes brimming with terror. He had no time to pay attention to Pu Jingwan's antics. The green-robed expert seemed to be growing impatient. Can you do it or not? Just tell me. Don't keep me in suspense, said the expert. The way Yi Zichen saw it, this expert was most likely an imperial emperor, and in the upper echelons. He was on the same level as Great Emperor Shuiyang and the others. Yi Zichen had no idea why Shuiyang had locked an expert like this up. However, Yi Zichen knew very well that experts of their level all had very high standard. There was no need to even think about quasi-divine artifact. If a quasi-divine artifact were to land beside them, not only would they not pick it up, they would even kick it away to avoid being an eyesore. It was also very difficult for them to take a fancy to ordinary divine artifact. The ones that they would take a fancy to would probably be on the divine artifact ranking. Although Yi Zichen had many fortuitous encounters, only a few of them were on the divine artifact rankings. After thinking it over, he took out a set of armor from his spatial ring. This set of armor was ranked 87th on the divine weapon ranking. Because he already had the swirling streamlight armor, he had originally left it for Yang Jian and the Great Sage. However, when he gave it to them, they didn't want it, so it was useless to keep it. Why not use it to test this expert? Senior, what do you think of this armor? The armor was very light. Although it looked like a set of heavy armor, it was as light as a goose feather. It was naturally made from rare divine materials, and a famous grandmaster from the Supreme Hall had forged it. Otherwise, it wouldn't have made it into the top 100 defensive divine artifact. The cyan-robed expert pursed his lips angrily, but didn't so much as glance at the armor. That's not it. He didn't like it. To tell the truth, although this kind of armor was useless to imperial emperors, it was still on the divine artifact rankings. Even Shuiyang would be delighted to get it. This expert, however, didn't so much as glance at it. Could it be that this senior likes to hunt for novelty? After thinking it over, Yi Zichen pulled a brick from his spatial ring. This was the same substandard divine artifact he'd used against Gu Li back in the Yao territory. It had a dizzying effect. Senior, what do you think? Kid, you're doing this on purpose, aren't you? To his surprise, the cyan-robed expert was furious. Do you think I'd take a liking to this kind of trash? Clang. Before Yi Zichen could speak, the cyan-robed expert waved his hand and tossed over 100 divine artifacts into the air. Defense type, blade type, support type, everything was available. They glowed with a myriad of colors, dazzling to behold. Do you see that? They're all on the divine artifact rankings. They're much higher ranked than that piece of crap you're holding. Gulp. Yi Zichen gulped subconsciously. Even Pu Jingwan and Yang Jian's attention was drawn to these divine artifacts. They were all on the divine artifact rankings. Just how rich was this expert? It was already impressive for an ordinary ruler to have a single divine artifact, and it was rare for an emperor-level expert to have a few on the rankings. Even great emperors like Shuiyang had a few in the top 100. This Yao expert had tossed them all out. Didn't he have around 100? Senior. Don't call me senior. If you want to trade, trade properly. Do you think I'm that free to mess around with you? The expert rolled his eyes. In truth, Yi Zichen had been scared out of his wits. He instinctively spoke up. There were over 100 treasures on the divine artifact rankings. What could someone with such a vast collection of top-grade divine artifacts possibly take a liking to? Yi Zichen couldn't think of anything the expert would take a liking to. Wait, could it be? Hey kid, you've figured out what I want, haven't you? Hurry up and take it out, said the expert. Yi Zichen had indeed thought of a divine artifact, but it was extremely important to him. Even if the expert wanted it, there was no way he'd give it to him. However, in order to confirm his suspicions, Yi Zichen took it out. Yi Zichen took out a small black pagoda. It was covered in rust and looked rather unassuming, but this unassuming pagoda was actually the famous Yao Ceiling Pagoda of the Three Realms. Senior, is this what you want? This treasure? This time, the expert didn't treat it with the same disdain he'd had for the brick and armor. Instead, he squinted and carefully examined it. What's this? It's called the Yao Ceiling Pagoda. Isn't that what you want? Asked Yi Zichen. Yao Ceiling Pagoda? That sounds a bit familiar. The expert mulled it over for a moment, then his eyes widened as if he'd just received an extreme fright. He retreated several meters. This scene left Yi Zichen, Yang Jian, and Pu Jingwan dumbstruck. Chapter 1572. The cyan-robed Yao expert's smile instantly vanished. When he looked at Yi Zichen, it was as if he'd encountered a primordial beast. His eyes flashed, and he couldn't help but retreat. As he retreated, he snuck a peek at the Yao Ceiling Pagoda in Yi Zichen's hands. Instantly, the cyan-robed expert's face drained of all color. He braced himself against the light barrier, lowered his head, and retched. Yi Zichen stared blankly at the Yao Ceiling Pagoda. Judging from the azure-robed expert's expression, he must have had some sort of past with the Five Elements' great emperor, and it was a rather bad memory. However, he kept retching. Could it be that this blue-robed expert had also been captured by the Yao Ceiling Pagoda before? Senior. Yi Zichen instinctively wanted to ask about the azure-robed expert, but when the Yao saw him approach, he reached out as if to push him away. Don't come over, don't come over. When he heard that, Yi Zichen froze in place, while the blue-robed expert panted heavily. The people on the second floor of the dungeon only saw his pale face and his retching appearance. What he didn't know was that the Yao Ceiling Pagoda was actually a nightmare to him. Looking at this iron tower that was only the size of a palm, he could think of the past. Don't think about it, he muttered to himself and shook his head vigorously. After a long time, the green-robed expert of the demon clan calmed down. He heaved a long sigh of relief as his Adam's apple bobbed up and down. He took out a bottle of wine from his bosom and gulped it down. As soon as the strong liquor entered his mouth, it was as if a ball of fire had ignited his entire body. This kind of stimulation also made him walk out of his state of retching, and his pale face was a little more flushed. You. The Yao expert sitting cross-legged by the bed pointed forward. When Yi Zichen saw this, he picked up the Yao Ceiling Pagoda and walked over. When the Yao saw him, his pupils constricted. Hurry up and put it away. Ao ao ao. Yi Zichen subconsciously revealed an air of endearment. If this Yao expert's emotions fluctuated so much when he saw the Yao Ceiling Pagoda, he definitely had bad memories of the pagoda. Yi Zichen, however, acted as if he hadn't reacted at all. The Yao Ceiling Pagoda remained in the Yao expert's line of sight the entire time. After putting away the Yao Ceiling Pagoda, the Yao expert sighed in relief and shook his head. You brat, you're doing this on purpose, aren't you? Senior, please understand. Junior did not do it on purpose. Yi Zichen smiled wryly. I feel like only a few of my treasures are worthy of your attention. You didn't care about the armor and the brick. After much consideration, I can only think of the Yao Ceiling Pagoda. Don't mention its name to me, the fiend race expert shouted. Oh, Yi Zichen obediently shut up. For a moment, the atmosphere in the dungeon was awkward. At that moment, the third floor's demon emperor suddenly went berserk. Yang Jian and Pu Jingwan hurriedly returned to Yi Zichen's side and used their divine power to protect him. The cyan-robed Yao expert frowned, then drew a few lines in front of him. This time, the old demon emperor's rampage only lasted for a short time, disappearing in less than a dozen breaths. The commotion eased the tension on the second floor somewhat. The Yao expert narrowed his eyes at Yi Zichen. You still haven't told me about your relationship with the Five Elements. What, are you his descendant? Senior, this junior is not related to the Five Elements' great emperor by blood, said Yi Zichen respectfully. If that's not the case, then I'm curious. Everyone knows that Emperor Hades and the Five Elements' Great Emperor were close friends. After the Five Elements' Great Emperor died, everyone assumed that Emperor Hades hadn't intervened. Little did they know, he'd tried to assassinate Zhou Wu several times, but to no avail. That's why their relationship soured. Instead, he was sent to the Divine Mountains to guard the border between the Yao and God realms. The cyan-robed Yao expert's eyes narrowed. His words seemed casual, but when they landed in Yi Zichen's ears, they stirred up waves of shock. Emperor Hades had tried to assassinate Zhou Wu, but to no avail. Although Zhou Wu was heartless, no one could ignore his cultivation. He was strong enough to sit atop the God Emperor's throne. Although Emperor Hades's cultivation was unfathomable, it wasn't impossible that he'd failed to assassinate Zhou Wu. What Yi Zichen cared about was that Emperor Hades had tried to assassinate him. The Fox Empress, Su Qingyan, and clan head, Su Wan, were once the Five Elements' Great Emperor's wives. Back when the Five Elements' Great Emperor died, Su Qingyan had gone to the river Styx 3 times, begging him to retrieve his soul from the river of time. However, he'd refused. For a time, the Empress assumed that Emperor Hades had disregarded his brotherly ties with the Five Elements' Great Emperor and resented him. From then on, they'd stopped communicating for 10,000 years. Even now, when both sides were in the same battle preparation group, the Empress and Emperor Hades hadn't communicated with each other at all. But now, the cyan-robed Yao expert overturned that theory and said that Emperor Hades had tried to assassinate Zhou Wu multiple times. Senior, how do you know all this? Yi Zichen didn't understand. Both Emperor Hades and the God Emperor Zhou Wu were famous figures. Yi Zichen had naturally never underestimated Yao expert. However, no one else knew about these assassinations. Not even the Ocean Emperor, Great Emperor Bian, Great Emperor Chao Feng, or Lady Providence knew about them. This Yao expert's cultivation was similar to theirs, so how could he possibly know such secrets? How would I know? When Emperor Hades tried to assassinate Zhou Wu, I was there. The cyan-robed expert narrowed his eyes in satisfaction, then suddenly remembered something. He swallowed the rest of his words, then snorted at Yi Zichen. Kid, you're trying to get information out of me. I wouldn't dare. Yi Zichen bowed and cupped his hands. It's just that the Fox Empress resented Emperor Hades for not searching the river of time for the Five Elements' Great Emperor's soul. Now you're saying that Emperor Hades tried to assassinate Zhou Wu to avenge the Five Elements' Great Emperor. Su Qingyan's rejection was inevitable, laughed the cyan-robed Yao expert. Emperor Hades was grievously injured when he tried to assassinate Zhou Wu. His decline came early because of those assassinations. You can ask Zhou Wu if he didn't show his face for 1,000 years after the Five Elements' Great Emperor died. That's because Emperor Hades made things difficult for him. It took him 1,000 years to recover. As for Five Elements' soul, the Five Elements' Great Emperor was an emperor-level expert when he was still alive. Even if Emperor Hades found his soul, the backlash wasn't something he could withstand. Besides, the Five Elements' Great Emperor's soul didn't return to the river Styx at all. How could Emperor Hades have come back to life? You even know that? Said Yi Zichen in astonishment. What's the fuss about knowing that? Even though the cyan-robed Yao expert was talking about secrets that even great emperors wouldn't know, his expression was as calm as ever. There was no hint of arrogance in it. Chapter 1573. When he looked at Yi Zichen, his eyes flashed with undisguisable light. If he'd only recently been imprisoned, given his status in the Jianghu, there was no way he wouldn't know who Yi Zichen was. However, he'd been locked up in the Shui family's dungeons this entire time. It had been 10,000 years since he'd seen the outside world, so he naturally had no idea what was going on outside. Perhaps he would be able to find out more about the situation outside. However, outsiders weren't familiar with him, so there was no way they'd tell him everything. It could be said that his knowledge of the outside world was like a blank sheet of paper. From the moment he laid eyes on Yi Zichen, he knew he was no ordinary person. Everyone in the Shui family's dungeons were important figures. Regardless of whether they were on the first or second floor, only members of the Shui family, or even direct descendants, could enter. Yi Zichen didn't have the Shui family's bloodline, yet he'd entered the Shui family's dungeons. This time, it was even more shocking than before. Shui Yang, the Sea Emperor, had given him the dungeon's identity medallion. Furthermore, from what he'd said, he had a close relationship with several great emperors. He was a diviner, yet he had the sole power of a ruler, and he had 2 emperor-level experts by his side. A disciple of the sacred beast race? That was impossible. Never mind the fact that a disciple of the sacred beast race couldn't interact with so many great emperors and gain their trust. Even the sacred tribe patriarch couldn't have such experts around him, not to mention the 2 emperor-level experts around him and the great sage who had appeared before. Yi Zichen didn't answer the blue-robed expert's question. "Are you a shaman?" The expert narrowed his eyes. "Are you a descendant of the 12 shaman ancestors? Or perhaps you're one of them?" Yi Zichen remained silent. The blue-robed expert guessed once more. "Are you from the outside?" "Senior, please stop guessing," said Yi Zichen. "My identity isn't important at all. Besides, even if you have your secrets you can't tell me, I have mine too." Little did he know, the blue-robed expert narrowed his eyes and smiled. "I understand." No one knew what he understood or whether he really understood or just faked it. In any case, the light in his eyes never faded. In fact, it only grew more and more playful. Yi Zichen felt somewhat uncomfortable under his gaze. Suddenly, he realized he'd made the wrong decision. Senior has been spying on this junior's privacy. It seems that this junior has been reckless. I shouldn't have troubled Senior to cooperate with this junior. Since that's the case, I won't disturb you any longer. Farewell. With that, Yi Zichen and company prepared to leave. The azure-robed expert was a bit anxious. Hey, stop. His words didn't stop Yi Zichen and the others. Suddenly, a pressure no weaker than the old demon emperor's instantly bore down on them. "I told you to stop right there." Crack. The Sea Emperor's clone, who was sitting in the front hall and discussing the internal conflict with the clan elders, frowned. The expressions of the other elders in the front hall darkened as well. Just now, they all felt a ferocious aura pressing down on them. Although this aura only appeared for a short time, it was enough to attract everyone's attention. How could it be him? The clone of the Ocean Emperor frowned at the dungeon and put the jade chip on the table. Third Elder continued discussing the follow-up matters with the other elders. "This emperor will be leaving for a while." After saying that, before the other elders could react, the Ocean Sovereign had already turned into a stream of water and disappeared from the front hall. Within the dungeon, the surging pressure was like the claws of a primordial beast. Yang Jian and Pu Jingwan struggled to hold on. Although Yi Zichen was the one being protected, he could still sense the ferocity of the aura. "Senior." Yi Zichen turned and cupped his hands. By now, the azure-robed expert had dispersed his pressure and was all smiles. "Don't mind me. I just want to keep you here. I don't want to do anything to you." At that moment, the azure-robed expert knit his brows, then muttered something to himself. He waved his hand, then smiled again. "Kid, just who are you?" "I won't ask. Why do you have to leave? Who cares about your relationship with the 5 Elements Great Emperor? He's already dead. As for why you're on such good terms with the other great emperors, I'm just curious. I don't really want to know." "Senior, what do you want?" asked Yi Zichen. "I just took a fancy to one of your possessions. We're working together, so we should at least have a proper discussion, don't you think?" laughed the azure-robed expert. Yi Zichen couldn't help but feel his heart tremble. Based on the aura he'd just released, it was likely that the 3 emperors were on the same level. for an expert like him to care so much about a supreme treasure. Of course, Yi Zichen had one more question. Senior, you're so powerful. I don't know why you were imprisoned here. Although the Ocean Emperor is a senior I respect, I still have to say that given his cultivation, it would be difficult for him to subdue you. Hey kid, I'm willing to listen to you, laughed the azure-robed expert. If we were on land, he naturally wouldn't be able to beat me. But this is the Sea of Innocence. Don't you know that Shui Yang is invincible wherever there's water? Besides, I'm more than happy to let him capture me. It'll save me from disaster. It seemed this Yao expert had offended quite a few people before he'd been imprisoned. Yi Zichen thought back to his divine artifacts. For ordinary people, obtaining them was harder than scaling the heavens. Even great emperors only had a few, but he had so many. Could it be he'd stolen all those divine artifacts? Senior. Don't call me senior. Let's talk about our partnership. I naturally don't want the Yao Ceiling Pagoda. I know it's important to a kid like you. What I want is… Let me give you a hint. I want the treasure on your arm. The treasure on his arm. The Xianyuan sword. Yi Zichen instantly realized what this Yao expert wanted. He had a divine artifact on his arm, the Xianyuan sword. He'd never thought of it before because he'd never considered it a bargaining chip. You've thought of it, haven't you? Just give it to me. Don't call me senior. You can even be my senior. Also, don't even ask me to help you keep an eye on that old bastard down there. So long as you can convince Shuiyang, I'll take you down with me. If he can hurt you, I'll cut my head off and let you play with it. What do you think? Asked the azure-robed expert urgently. Yi Zichen knit his brows, but he didn't respond. Whoosh. At that moment they heard the sound of flowing water. Then, they saw a man in ocean-colored robes appear on the second floor of the dungeon. Chapter 1574. The Sea Emperor stood between Yi Zichen and the cyan-robed expert. She glanced silently at the cyan-robed expert, then turned back to Yi Zichen. Are you all right? Yi Zichen hadn't expected the Ocean Emperor to show up. When he heard her question, he cupped his hands respectfully. I'm fine. What are you doing here? The cyan-robed expert's gaze faltered when he saw the Ocean Emperor. He sized her up for a while, then arched his brows. So it's a clone. And here I thought it was my true body. What? Do you think you can scare this venerable one? The cyan-robed expert's tone was arrogant. He had no respect whatsoever for the Ocean Emperor. The other Yao experts didn't dare show the slightest disrespect. Even if this wasn't just a clone, everyone in the Three Realms knew that the Ocean Emperor's clone was also an Imperial Emperor. The Ocean Emperor's clone wasn't angry in the face of the cyan-robed expert's disdain. He knew that even if the Ocean Emperor's true body was here, he'd still act the same. If you'd really heard him just now, forget about the Ocean Emperor's true body. Xianji, Emperor Hades, Baian, Chao Feng, the Hermit Emperor, Su Qinyan, Su Wan, Zhao Qianling. I'm afraid they'll all come. Right, there's also the Lord of the Big Dipper, who recently inherited her position as the Lord of Seven Stars. She'll come too, and she'll be furious. The clone laughed. The arrogant cyan-robed expert froze. He blinked several times, his mind in a daze. Those two grannies of the Fox clan have a close relationship with this kid? The cyan-robed expert was dumbfounded. The Ocean Emperor's clone smiled but said nothing. The cyan-robed expert stared blankly at Yi Zichen's bitter smile. He'd naturally guessed that Yi Zichen's identity was special, but why did he feel like he'd poked a hornet's nest? Just now, the Ocean Emperor's clone had just mentioned were all major figures who could shake a region. The four divine mountain emperors, the profound pavilion master, the empress and clan head of the nine-tailed fox clan. Emperor Hades went without saying. Out of all these people, the ones he was most familiar with were the nine-tailed fox sisters. The only reason he had come into contact with them was because of the Five Elements' great emperor. As for why he was related to the Five Elements Great Emperor, that was a long story. He had called them grannies, because of some things that had happened in between. In short, he was most afraid of these two from the Fox clan. There was also the Lord of Seven Star. The previous Lord of Seven Star was the ruler of all the stars in the universe. Her position surpassed even that of Emperor Chao Feng, who had founded the Star Altar. However, the previous Lord of Seven Stars had fallen 10,000 years ago. Who would have thought? The new Lord of Seven Stars was actually related to Yi Zichen as well. Little fellow. The green-robed expert shook his head at Yi Zichen. You've truly impressed me. Senior, you're being too serious, Yi Zichen smiled wryly. But what can we do? Suddenly, the green-robed expert's expression changed. Even if all of you come, what can you do to me? I can't beat all of you, so can't I just hide? The green-robed expert laughed fearlessly. With so many great emperors attacking at once, never mind the green-robed expert, even the god, Yao, and demon emperors would have to think twice before attacking. Yi Zichen couldn't help but be astonished. Hide? If these great emperors wanted to find someone, they could find him even if he hid 3 feet underground. How could the green-robed expert swear so confidently that they couldn't touch him? Also, the Ocean Emperor had called him the Venerable of Numinous Treasure. If you hide in your turtle shell, we naturally can't do anything to you, but do you really want to go through those dark days again? Laughed the clone. Humph. The green-robed expert didn't comment. Numinous Treasure, don't be angry. In truth, you should be thanking me. I saved your life. The clone sighed helplessly. You were just trying to swindle him out of his divine artifact, weren't you? The green-robed expert was instantly infuriated. What do you mean swindle me? This little fellow wants to cooperate with me. We're making a proper deal. Fine, a proper deal. The clone didn't argue. He simply shook his head and laughed. Do you know what you wanted just now? What? Asked the green-robed expert. The Ocean Emperor didn't reply. Instead, she looked at Yi Zichen and nodded. Summon the Xianyuan sword. I doubt he has the guts to ask for it. What a joke! And my numinous treasure. The Venerable snorted disdainfully, but before he could finish his sentence, he froze. Wait a moment. Did I hear wrong? The Xianyuan sword. While the Venerable was still in a daze, Yi Zichen summoned the Xianyuan sword. The Ocean Emperor's clone was here, and he was so certain that the Venerable wouldn't dare ask for the sword. He naturally didn't hesitate. He summoned the Xianyuan sword. The golden blade radiated dazzling light, bathing the entire dungeon in a golden sheen. The instant the Venerable saw the Xianyuan sword, his face paled. He was even paler than when he'd first seen the Yaoxiling pagoda. What was even more unbelievable was that the Venerable's cultivation was so high that his legs were trembling uncontrollably. At this moment, both of his legs were trembling uncontrollably. He forcefully covered his mouth with his hand. His entire skin had turned red, and his eyeballs looked as though they were about to pop out. After so many years, the Xianyuan sword still has such a great influence on you. It seems that you remember the lesson from that time very well. The Ocean Emperor's clone was not surprised by the Venerable of Numinous Treasure's reaction. Instead, he smiled as if it was only natural. I'll give it to you. Do you dare to take it? Why wouldn't I? The Venerable of Lingbao forced himself to raise his head, but the moment he saw the Xianyuan sword, he couldn't finish his sentence. After a long time, she heard him yell while gnashing his teeth. No. That's more like it. You know, when I heard you say that you wanted the god artifact on his arm, I was even thinking about not coming out, the Ocean Emperor's clone said with a smile. My skills are still the same as before. I knew he had treasures the moment I saw him. I didn't expect him to have more treasures than I thought. The Xianyuan sword, he even has it. The Venerable of Lingbao was still gnashing his teeth. Senior, before Yi Zichen could speak, the Venerable of Lingbao cut him off. Don't call me senior. You're my senior. You brat, the heavens really sent you here to torture me. You have the 5 elements great emperor's Yao Sealing Pagoda, and now you have the Xianyuan sword too. Son, don't go any further. I'm in a bad mood right now. Hurry up and leave. Then let's work together. What do you mean work together? While I'm in a good mood, hurry up and scram. Also, be careful next time you come down. Who knows, I might go crazy like that old geezer. What kind of cooperation? Asked the Ocean Emperor's clone. Yi Zichen hesitated for a moment, then explained his thoughts to the clone. After learning the specifics, the clone chuckled. Numinous treasure, you don't want to cooperate? Chapter 1575. The second floor of the Shui family's dungeon. The light barrier around the venerable numinous treasure had already dispersed. Yi Zichen, Yang Jian, Pu Jingwan, and the Ocean Emperor were all in his cell. However, there was one more person besides them. Xianyuan Xiang. The venerable of numinous treasure, who used to be very arrogant, was now behaving very differently from before. Alliance head Yi, I'll keep an eye on that old geezer for you. If there's any news, I'll relay it to you through this treasure. As soon as he said that, the venerable numinous treasure bowed to Xianyuan Xiang. Big Sister Xiang, are you satisfied? Why are you asking me? Ask him. Xianyuan Xiang glared at the venerable numinous treasure, then pointed at Yi Zichen. If he's satisfied, then there's naturally no problem. Alliance head Yi. The venerable numinous treasure smiled apologetically. In truth, Yi Zichen couldn't quite understand what was going on. Earlier, when the Ocean Emperor's clone told him to summon Xianyuan Xiang, he'd been puzzled, but he'd obediently summoned her. That was when the unexpected happened. When Xianyuan Xiang saw the venerable numinous treasure, she froze, then called out his name. The venerable numinous treasure was like a mouse that saw a cat. His arrogance instantly vanished into thin air. Oh, fine. Yi Zichen felt like everything was too surreal. He couldn't quite believe it. After receiving Yi Zichen's approval, the venerable numinous treasure turned to Xianyuan Xiang. She crossed her arms and snorted coldly. You should have done this from the start. Why did you go out of your way to find me? Yes. The venerable numinous treasure smiled apologetically, then glared at Yi Zichen. Alliance head Yi, this is your fault. If you'd said you were with Big Sister Xiang earlier, I would've. Xianyuan Xiang narrowed her eyes. It's all my fault. The venerable numinous treasure smiled bitterly. Xianyuan Xiang snorted, then dragged Yi Zichen away. From now on, this kid can order numinous treasure around as he pleases. Let's not hang out with a little Yao like him. He'll lower our standards. A little Yao. Just the aura the venerable numinous treasure had released was enough to overwhelm even the Yao Emperor Tai. He was a little Yao. Who in the demon race would dare to call themselves a great demon? However, the Lord of Numinous Treasure didn't dare to say anything. He merely nodded and bowed as he watched Xianyuan Xiang drag Yi Zichen out of the dungeon. After leaving the dungeon, the Ocean Sovereign said that she had business to attend to, so she left. Yi Zichen, who stood outside the dungeon, was unable to recover from his shock for a long time. He looked at the contact on his phone and thought about the venerable of Numinous Treasure's attitude towards Xianyuan Xiang. Sister Xiang. What happened? Xianyuan Xiang squinted her eyes, then reached out to grab Yi Zichen's ear. You brat, how long has it been since you contacted me? You know to find me when you need me, but you don't even say anything when you don't need me. Sister Xiang, it hurts, Yi Zichen cried out in pain. There was no way Xianyuan Xiang would actually grab him. She knew very well that Yi Zichen was just pretending. However, she still loosened her grip and hugged her shoulders as she snorted. You want to know why the Venerable of Lingbao is so afraid of me, right? Yi Zichen nodded. Xianyuan Xiang continued. In truth, it's actually quite simple. The Venerable of Lingbao has always been called a treasure-devouring maniac. His true form is that of a toad, but he can devour treasures to strengthen himself. Back then, he tried to devour me, but my magic power caused his body to explode. After that, that's what you see now." Yi Zichen furrowed his brows. The Yellow Emperor was only 5,000 years old. Naturally, he'd only obtained the Xianyuan sword about that long. The Venerable of Lingbao had been imprisoned by the Ocean Sovereign for 10,000 years. How did he? By the time the Yellow Emperor obtained the Xianyuan sword, he was already the second generation. "Sister Xiang, were you called Xianyuan Xiang before?" asked Yi Zichen. "Of course not." Xianyuan Xiang shrugged. "In truth, my memories of the first generation are rather hazy. I only remembered a little after you condensed a godhead for me. I vaguely recall that I was called Shangguan Xiang back then. In short, the Yellow Emperor was the one who gave me the name Xianyuan Xiang. Alright. If you want, I can start calling myself Yi Xiang from now on." "Let's not." "What? You're not happy that my surname is Yi?" Xianyuan Xiang raised her eyebrows. "That's not what I meant," Yi Zichen smiled wryly. "The Yellow Emperor is me, so there's no difference between Yi Xiang and Xianyuan Xiang. It's just that this Venerable of Lingbao is a bit strange. There's actually someone who can rely on devouring treasures to increase his cultivation? He's just a toad with good luck. Don't interact too much with him. He'll lower our level." Xianyuan Xiang twitched her mouth. Yi Zichen was speechless. Perhaps only Xianyuan Xiang could call the Venerable of Lingbao a toad so casually. Yi Zichen's eyes suddenly lit up. "Hey, you can't be thinking of recruiting him, right?" Xianyuan Xiang immediately saw through Yi Zichen's plan. "Hee, I do. Can you help me out?" Yi Zichen raised his eyebrows. Although Xianyuan Xiang slandered the Venerable of Lingbao, there was one undeniable fact. His cultivation was terrifyingly high. He'd been imprisoned for 10,000 years, which meant there was a 10,000-year gap. If Yi Zichen recruited him, he'd be no small help. In fact, he'd be of great help. "Don't ask me for help. I don't want to be associated with a toad like him. Besides, are you sure the people around you will agree to take him under your command?" Xianyuan Xiang asked. "Why not?" Yi Zichen didn't understand. "If you don't believe me, try contacting the great emperors. Bring up a toad and see what they think," shrugged Xianyuan Xiang. Yi Zichen didn't doubt her and opened the group chat. Coincidentally, as soon as he entered, he saw Great Emperor Bayan of the Four Directions Palace appear. "Lord 7, but I've suffered so much. How are things on your side?" "Lord 3, it ended long ago. I didn't want to hurt your confidence, so I didn't dare say anything." "Hermit Emperor, I'm done here too. Jade Lake Palace Head, it ended 3 days ago." "I'm sorry." "Lord 7? Are you guys lying to me with your eyes wide open?" "Jade Lake Palace Head, ask your subordinate. Don't tell me you didn't plant people in our divine mountains." "Lord 7, heh." When Yi Zichen saw by Anne's silly grin, he knew the Jade Lake Palace Head was telling the truth. She'd sent the message less than 10 breaths ago. "Lord 7, it's really my place that's the slowest." "No way. Invincible adorable beauty, the Northern Divine Mountain isn't finished yet. The Ocean Emperor just said he had business to attend to." "Lord of the Big Dipper, only idealism Lord of the Big Dipper, you've reached the Northern Divine Mountain. How's the situation? Zichen, are you alright? Are you injured?" "Only idealism. I'm fine, Mom. Don't worry about me." As soon as the message was sent, the great emperors in the group went berserk, mocking Ocean Emperor Fenghai for his lack of efficiency and management problems. They wanted him to hurry up and clear the Northern Divine Mountain so they could manage it for him. Yi Zichen looked at the scrolling messages and couldn't help but scratch his head. He hesitated for a moment. "Only idealism. I have something I'd like to discuss with you." "Lord 7, Emperor Star, do you even need to discuss anything with us? Just say whatever you want." "Lord 3, now that your mother is in charge of the Star Altar, I feel so wronged as an emperor. Jade Lake Palace Head, my daughter's life is in your hands. What's there to discuss? Just decide. Hermit Emperor, I have no objections. Only idealism, Do you know the venerable of numinous treasure? Silence. After a brief moment of silence. Lord 7. Numinous treasure? That bastard popped out of nowhere? Only idealism, you saw him? Tell me where he is. I'm going to kill him. Lord 3, count me in. Jade Lake Palace Head, count me in. Furious, 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 Fox Empress? Send your coordinates. As Yi Zichen read the messages, he. Chapter 1576. Was this really necessary? The normally awe-inspiring great emperors were now flustered and exasperated. When Yi Zichen saw the angry messages flooding the chat, he wondered if the great emperors had used some sort of divine ability to create 3 heads and 6 arms and flood the chat. Their scrolling frequency was even greater than that of 100,000 trolls. In truth, Yi Zichen had mentally prepared himself for Xian Yuan Xiang's earlier words. He'd thought at most 2 would be enough, but who would have guessed that only the Sea Emperor, who was busy with official business, and the Hermit Emperor, who'd long since retired from worldly affairs. The others. She silently wiped away the cold sweat on her face, then craned her neck to look at the messages. She pursed her lips and arched her elegant brows. The results were more or less the same as she'd expected. There were just too few people in the group. If she brought a few more major powers in, the group might get even livelier. This couldn't go on. When he saw that the great emperors were on the verge of exploding, Yi Zichen hurriedly sent a message. Only idealism. Great emperors, please calm down. A line of cold sweat emojis. Only idealism. Don't get so angry just because you mention the venerable of numinous treasure. Actually, the venerable of numinous treasure and I. Yi Zichen didn't know how to explain, so he used ellipses. The venerable of numinous treasure had been imprisoned by Shui Yang for 10,000 years. The other great emperors had no idea, so how could Yi Zichen possibly know? A chance encounter? Or perhaps a mere hearsay? Judging by the great emperor's expressions, even the slightest movement from the venerable of numinous treasure wouldn't escape their ears. Furthermore, it had been 10,000 years, yet the great emperors hadn't known the venerable of numinous treasure was with the Ocean Emperor. He was definitely hiding it. Perhaps he was worried that the great emperors would find out the venerable of numinous treasure was with him. They'd probably destroy the Shui family's dungeons. More importantly, he was worried that the demon emperor's identity would be exposed. The Ocean Emperor's clone had said that if others found out, the Shui family might be labeled traitors. The great emperors in the group were all smart. Yi Zichen's current cover was utterly useless against them. The instant he sent the message, he received over 99 ads, all of them questioning him about the venerable of numinous treasure's whereabouts. After a long period of fruitless questioning, the news of the venerable Lingbao seemed to have become a huge trade fair. Jade Lake Palace Master. Only idealism, Alliance Leader Yi. Tell me about the venerable of Lingbao. You can choose any divine-grade elixir. Lord 7. 2 heavenly fortune pills. Third Elder. 4 divine artifacts on the divine artifact ranking. Fox Empress. We, the Fox clan, are willing to offer 3 fox senses. Grandpa 7. Empress of the Fox clan, are you kidding me? You even dare to give out the will of the fox? Isn't that a sacred item left behind by your fox ancestor? Since you dare to act like this, don't force me to use my ultimate move. 7th Master. Only idealism. Star Lord Yi, let's not beat around the bush. If you want to marry little 17, you have to go through me. Do you understand? Jade Lake Palace Master. Star Lord Yi, what do you think of Mo? Fox Empress. Su Yen is a member of the Fox clan. Elder San, what's going on? You're trying to be a matchmaker, aren't you? Alright, since you guys are like this third elder, only idealism, this emperor has an adopted daughter. Yi Zichen was completely confused. Earlier, when he'd read about the treasures the great emperors were talking about, he'd been tempted. Divine grade pills, heavenly fortune pills, divine artifacts on the divine artifact rankings, and great emperor by Anne's fox senses, which he'd never heard of before. He'd used these treasures in exchange for information he didn't know was real or fake. But now, the trade fair had transformed into a marriage proposal meeting and a threat meeting. Great Emperor Chaofeng was the matchmaker. Coincidentally, these great emperors all had women who were very important to him. Shui Mo and the others were brothers, but Su Yan and Lu Jing. Wow, what's going on with these great emperors? Pu Jingwan couldn't help but blink at the messages in the group. What on earth did the Venerable of Numinous Treasure do to them for them to act like this? Don't be fooled by that toad's current appearance. 10,000 years ago. Xianyuan Xiang laughed calmly, her eyes twinkling with amusement. He stole who knows how many great emperors' divine artifacts and swallowed them. Do you know why he's currently locked up in the Sea of Innocence's dungeons? Why? Pu Jingwan glared at her. The Ocean Emperor's divine artifacts are the Sea God Crown, Sea God Scepter, and Sea God Ring. Do you know why the Ocean Emperor no longer wears the Sea God Ring? Could it be he swallowed it? Xianyuan Xiang shrugged. Back then, the Ocean Emperor chased that toad for over half a year, but the toad somehow obtained a defensive divine artifact. Even in the sea, the Ocean Emperor's scepter couldn't break through it in the slightest. The two of them confronted each other for a few hundred years. I don't know, but I'm guessing he couldn't stand living like a turtle any longer, so he admitted defeat to the Ocean Emperor. That. Even Yi Zichen was flabbergasted. This Venerable of Numinous Treasure was too ruthless. He'd even dared swallow a divine artifact. If he were the Ocean Emperor, he'd definitely fly into a rage. He'd swallowed one of the 3 God-sealing treasures. I remember him trying to swallow the Yao-sealing pagoda, and the 5 elements great emperor beat him up countless times. But his memory just doesn't change. He followed the 5 elements great emperor for a few hundred years, said Xianyuan Xiang. No wonder. Yi Zichen nodded. No wonder he knew so much about the 5 elements great emperor and Zhou Wu. No wonder he'd reacted that way when he saw the Yao-sealing pagoda. Perhaps he'd swallowed it before, but hadn't digested it. The groups at S weren't done yet, but at that moment. Ding-dong. Yi Zichen's phone vibrated. He looked at it and saw several notifications. After exiting the group, he saw that it was the Ocean Sovereign who had sent him the pinned message. Ocean Emperor, don't cause trouble. Ocean Emperor, I'm telling you, don't cause trouble. You'd best explain everything to me. Ocean Emperor, you know who's in the dungeons. If they find out and tear down my dungeons, the Shui family won't let you off the hook. Ocean Emperor, don't forget Hong Hong is my daughter. Ocean Emperor, don't cause trouble, all right? Yi Zichen understood the Ocean Emperor's worries, and he naturally understood the current situation. He absolutely couldn't expose the Venerable of Numinous Treasure's position. Even if he did, he couldn't reveal that the Venerable of Numinous Treasure was currently in the Shui family dungeons. He couldn't reveal the old Demon Emperor's existence just yet. Don't worry, I definitely won't let. Yi Zichen hadn't even finished typing the message when he saw the Ocean Emperor fly into a rage. What the hell are you talking about? Look at what you've done. At the same time, a frantic figure flashed through the sky. When he looked up, he saw the Ocean Emperor's clone, who'd just gone to take care of business. The clone's brows were furrowed, and he looked at Yi Zichen angrily, but he couldn't help but shake his head and sigh. Chapter 1577. To say that he couldn't accomplish anything but was good at spoiling things might be a little too much. However, Yang Jian and Pu Jingwan were the ones who'd ruined the Sovereign of Numinous Treasure's plans. Yi Zichen had the Venerable of Numinous Treasure's source of information. As long as he didn't say anything, It didn't matter how much the other great emperors tagged him. Not long after he left the group, he had already spoken to the Ocean Sovereign, who was in the Nether River. When he returned to the group, 7th Lord, Ocean Empress 3rd Lord, Ocean Empress, Jade Lake Palace Master, Ocean Sovereign Fox Empress, Ocean Empress, the great emperors in the group stopped tagging Yi Zichen. Instead, they started tagging the great emperor of the Northern Divine Mountain, the ruler of the Sea of Innocence, the Sea Emperor. He scrolled through the chat logs and saw that it was Pu Jingwan and Yang Jian. Invincible, adorable beauty. I know where the venerable Ling Bao is. I don't want your daughter. Can you give me the treasures you mentioned earlier? God Erlang, I know. Fox Empress, sure. No matter who it is, we will give you what we promised. Invincible, adorable beauty. The venerable of Ling Bao is in the Shui family's dungeon. Erlang Shin, the person above is right. Invincible, adorable beauty. Now that I've told you my location, don't go back on your word. Add me as a friend and send me a red packet. Erlang Shin, me too. There was an inexplicable dead silence in the group. After 5 minutes of silence, the great emperors in the group started to mention Sea Emperor like crazy, hoping to get an explanation from him. When Yi Zichen saw the news, he couldn't help but grit his teeth. In the end, he'd still lost to Pu Jingwan's money-grubbing personality. Even though she had lived in the outer realm, as an imperial lord, she was very clear about the value of the items mentioned by the great emperors. Be it divine weapons, divine pills, or fox thoughts of the Fox clan. All of these were much more expensive than the supreme souls and deva souls that she usually collected. It seemed that she had not been able to resist the temptation of these treasures, so she had been possessed and sent the location of the venerable one of Lingbao. More importantly, she had sent the real address. The Ocean Emperor's clone was frowning so hard that the center of his eyebrows was almost furrowed. Even during the Northern Divine Mountain's internal strife, he had never shown such an expression. However, once the location of the venerable Ling Bao was leaked, several great emperors would be attracted. They absolutely could not be allowed to enter the Shui family's dungeon. As long as they entered the dungeon, they would find the old demon emperor. The reason why the old demon emperor was detained in the dungeon of the Shui family was not something that could be explained in a few words. Those great emperors wouldn't be able to fool them easily. They would definitely get to the bottom of it and might even send people to investigate. At that time, if they knew the truth, the Shui family wouldn't be able to explain themselves even if they had a mouth. Ocean Empress. Yi Zichen licked his lips and looked over. When the Sea Emperor's clone saw Yi Zichen, his eyes were filled with disappointment. I shouldn't have given you the token. The Ocean Emperor's disappointed gaze made Yi Zichen's heart clench. He was undoubtedly furious. This matter concerned the future of the entire Shui family. As the head of the family, how could he not be angry? If it was anyone else, even if it was a powerful elder of the Shui family, he might have killed them in a fit of rage. However, Yi Zichen was the Emperor's star. He would affect the transcendence of this era, and the future of all living beings in the three realms. Even if he was the Ocean Emperor, no matter how angry he was, he couldn't kill Yi Zichen. All he could do was sigh and think complacently about how he was going to fool the great emperors into a frenzy. Yi Zichen couldn't face the Ocean Emperor calmly, so all he could do was approach Pu Jingwan and the others. However, he discovered that Pu Jingwan was beaming like a silly girl from a rich family. She kept accepting red packets from the great emperors. Come to think of it, the great emperors were true to their word. Whatever they said in the group, they sent red packets exactly as they said. Pu Jingwan. Yang Jian. Don't bother me. I'm busy. Pu Jingwan waved her hand and ignored Yi Zichen. Yang Jian glanced at Yi Zichen, and when he saw his unfriendly expression, he couldn't help but rub his hands and ask, "What is it? Yang Jian, are these things really that important to you? When I gave you that set of battle armor, didn't you also refuse it?" Are these great emperor's treasures really that important to you? Yi Zichen shook his head repeatedly. Pu Jingwan loves money, so she's just messing around. Why are you messing around with her? Stop messing around. Yi, what are you talking about? I'm just trying to help you cut your losses. Yang Jian said righteously. Pu Jingwan will definitely spill the beans. I can't just let her get all the benefits, can I? I'm helping you steal your treasures. Look, let's split it half and half. I'll send it all to you in a bit. As soon as he said that, Yi Zichen's phone vibrated. I'm sending it to you. Yi Zichen couldn't help but cover his face. Yang Jian's words were infuriating, yet funny. From Yang Jian's tone, it was clear that he didn't care about these treasures at all. He just didn't want Yi Zichen to lose out too much. That was why he'd said it when Pu Jingwan said she was going to expose the venerable of numinous treasure's location. His brain worked pretty quickly, but… Yang Jian, now isn't the time to worry about these things, said Yi Zichen. Yi Zichen smiled bitterly and covered his face. At that moment, Pu Jingwan walked up to him. She'd just received so many treasures from the great emperor, and her face was brimming with undisguised happiness. She muttered to herself, as if calculating the value of the treasures. When she got closer and saw Yi Zichen's distressed expression, she tilted her head and chuckled. Why are you still looking so sad? You still have the nerve to ask? Yi Zichen glared at her in exasperation, then said helplessly, Did you take all of the great emperor's red packets? Put it away. Your great emperor really is generous, Pu Jingwan said with a sigh. Did you enjoy it? Not really, but I'm happy, Wang Yao said. Pu Jingwan thought it over carefully for a moment, then nodded. When he saw this, Yi Zichen was even more furious. You really are magnanimous. Miss, do you know that the Ocean Emperor is about to explode with rage after hearing what you just said in the group chat? Why do you say that? Pu Jingwan didn't understand. Isn't it just the sovereign of numinous treasure? So what if we tell the great emperors? He was the one in the wrong, so wouldn't it be better for the great emperors to take revenge? Besides, the sovereign of numinous treasure has so many divine artifacts. If the great emperors snatch them away, we'll give them information. Who knows, we might even get a share. Yi Zichen almost coughed up blood. He'd never guessed that Pu Jingwan wouldn't be tempted by the great emperor's treasures, but by the sovereign of numinous treasure's divine artifacts. No wonder her eyes lit up when she saw the sovereign of numinous treasure. She'd always been a money grubber. Even if Yi Zichen wanted to get angry, he couldn't. He could only sigh. But don't forget what we heard from the Ocean Emperor. The old demon emperor is being held captive down there. We absolutely can't let anyone know about this. Isn't that simple? Pu Jingwan shrugged indifferently. You're just worried that the other great emperors will find out about the old demon emperor's whereabouts and harm the Shui family, right? Just give the sovereign of numinous treasure the old demon emperor or lock him up somewhere else. Wouldn't that solve everything? Chapter 1578. The possibility of taking the old demon emperor away was slim. After being detained for so long, it was hard to say whether the old demon emperor would cooperate or not. Besides, the one left behind in the Sea of Innocence was only the Sea Emperor's clone. Even though they were in the Sea region, he wasn't certain that he could suppress the old demon emperor who had once shaken the three realms. It was possible to bring the venerable of Lingbao out of the dungeon with Sister Xiang around. When Yi Zichen heard that, he fell into deep thought. Pu Jingwan smiled at him, as if saying, You see, I'm smart, right? Hurry up and praise me. He couldn't be bothered to deal with this money grubber. Bringing the venerable of numinous treasure out of the dungeon was definitely a bad idea. If Pu Jingwan hadn't mentioned it in the group chat, things wouldn't have turned out this way. The Ocean Sovereign's true body was being questioned by the other great emperors in the group. As soon as the Ocean Sovereign's explanation appeared, it was drowned in the condemnation of the other great emperors. A few of the great emperors had even said that they'd head to the Sea of Innocence, and that they wouldn't stop until they saw the venerable of numinous treasures. Ocean Empress. Yi Zichen knew full well that he was the cause of this trouble, so he looked at the Ocean Emperor apologetically. Now that things have come to this, even the great emperors are coming here. We definitely can't let them enter the dungeon. Why don't we release the venerable of Lingbao? That's absolutely impossible, the Ocean Sovereign vetoed. Although the Ocean Emperor's clone could remain calm in front of the venerable of numinous treasure, it did not mean that he could completely forgive the venerable of numinous treasure. The sea god's 3 divine weapons were originally 3 divine weapons that complemented each other. The venerable of numinous treasure had devoured the Neptune ring, causing the Neptune 3-piece set to be incomplete. As a result, the Ocean Emperor's combat power had dropped by more than 30%. It was already benevolent of them to not kill such a sinner, but to let him out, there was no need to even think about it. Why are you so inflexible? Seeing Sea Emperor's resolute response, Pu Jingwan pursed her lips. Those great emperors are coming. Is your grudge with the sovereign of numinous treasures more important, or is the reputation and clan of the Sea of Innocence's Shui family more important? Pu Jingwan was preaching as if she'd completely forgotten about this. If she hadn't been greedy, she wouldn't have ended up like this. This is simply... Let's not talk about that. I suggest you discuss things with me first. Don't act so arbitrarily. Pu Jingwan shrugged. Yi Zichen glared at Pu Jingwan. In the end, this was all because of him. Whether it was Pu Jingwan exposing herself in the group chat or something else, Pu Jingwan and Yang Jian were his people, and he couldn't avoid responsibility. Yi Zichen signaled for Pu Jingwan to stop talking nonsense. After a moment's hesitation, he spoke. Ocean Empress, even though I'm the cause of all this, don't blame me. But what Jingwan said isn't without reason. Why don't you discuss it with me? We don't have much time left. There are already a few great emperors in the group who are preparing to come. All right. After taking a deep breath, the Ocean Sovereign's clone contacted her main body. Yi Zichen looked at Pu Jingwan and couldn't help but shake his head. He knew full well that with Big Sister Xiang here, the venerable of numinous treasure couldn't possibly cause any trouble. Nevertheless, the venerable Lingbao's realm was too high, so no one cared whether Sister Xiang could continue to be a deterrent. There was also Pu Jingwan's avaricious personality. Perhaps it was because of her experience as a bounty hunter in the outside that she was sensitive to money. For now, the venerable of numinous treasures matter seemed to have been dealt with appropriately, but in the long run, no one could guarantee that Pu Jingwan wouldn't cause something even worse. Hey, don't look at me like that. I'll be careful. Sensing Yi Zichen's gaze, Pu Jingwan pursed her lips, then looked around. Why isn't that monkey here? Didn't he say he'd be waiting for us outside? Everything had come together. If not for Pu Jingwan's reminder, Yi Zichen wouldn't have noticed. Before entering, the great sage had said he'd wait for them outside, but now that they'd left the dungeon, there was no sign of him. I wanted to say this as soon as we got out, said Yang Jian with a shrug. Just now I sent that monkey a message, but he didn't reply. He even said he'd rush in as soon as something went wrong. How unreliable. Perhaps the great sage has some business to attend to. Yi Zichen wasn't worried about the great sage's safety. As an imperial emperor, he could roam the upper 3 realms with ease. Given the great sage's abilities, there was no need to worry. However, Yi Zichen was more concerned. What on earth would make the great sage leave without a word? Just as everyone was wondering where the great sage had gone, the Sea Emperor's clone walked over and said, I agree. I agree. The Sea of Innocence. Within the Sea of Innocence's official meeting hall, towering auras roiled about. The sky above the Sea of Innocence was dyed gray. Less than half a month after the venerable of numinous treasures' whereabouts were revealed, the great emperors in the war preparations group all put aside their work and rushed to the Shui family's residence. The hermit emperor hurried over from the hermit palace as well. In truth, he had no grudge with the venerable of numinous treasure. He'd simply come to watch the show. Don't doubt it. These were the hermit emperor's exact words when Yi Zichen met with him. Shui Yang, you're really something. I can't believe the venerable of numinous treasure let you hide in the Shui family's residence for 10,000 years without the slightest hint of your whereabouts being revealed. Not even the Jade Lake Palace head knows about it. You. Great Emperor Baiyan sat in his chair and looked at the Sea Emperor's clone. He gnashed his teeth and shook his head. Forget it. You're just a clone. I can't be bothered to quibble with you. If I were here, even though this is the Sea of Innocence, I'd absolutely demand an explanation from you. Great Emperor Baiyan, Great Emperor Chao Feng, Empress Su Qinyan, and the Jade Lake Palace head were all present. Everyone here was enraged, especially Great Emperor Baiyan, because he was the one who had suffered the most from Venerable Ling Bao, Long Shi's treasure. As the dragon god's seventh son, although he'd lived in the god realm's territory for so long, he still retained his dragon nature. In his early years, he'd loved collecting all sorts of rare treasures and divine weapons. Great Emperor Chao Feng naturally collected them as well, but in the end, his residence was the Star Altar. Even the venerable of numinous treasure wouldn't be easy to obtain. That's why the venerable of numinous treasure had set his sights on Great Emperor Baiyan. He'd committed no less than 100 crimes in the Four Directions Palace. Many of the treasures on the divine artifact rankings had been stolen from Great Emperor Baiyan. All right, OL7, the venerable of numinous treasure will be here in a moment. Great Emperor Chao Feng was more composed, but his eyes were burning with rage. Why isn't he here yet? The Jade Lake Palace head furrowed her brows. The Sea Emperor couldn't help but laugh sheepishly. Emperor Yi has already gone to invite him. It shouldn't be long. Invite him? Do you think he's worthy? If he comes, I'll make him bleed. Chapter 1579. This arrogant sneer suddenly appeared in the hall. From this sneer, everyone could feel the unruly, arrogant, and despotic attitude of the person who had just arrived. The great emperors looked over and saw the man standing by Yi Zichen's side. He wore green robes, had long sideburns, and a hint of disdain in his spirited eyes. When the great emperor saw him, he didn't even try to hide his gaze. This was none other than the Yao expert in green robes, the sovereign of numinous treasure. With Xianyuan Xiang around, this omnipotent venerable one was especially cooperative. Perhaps because he'd been locked up in the dungeons for too long, he wanted to come out and see the outside world. Yi Zichen and the others didn't need to explain too much. The sovereign already expressed his willingness to cooperate. Since leaving the dungeons, he hadn't done anything to cause them any trouble. He'd left the Sea of Innocence once, and taken a stroll through the surrounding cities. He'd never even considered running away. In short, it seemed the sovereign of numinous treasure was cooperating with Yi Zichen and the others. Even so, the Ocean Emperor was still worried about him. She'd sent several clan elders to keep an eye on him day and night. Given his cultivation, the sovereign of numinous treasure could naturally sense it, but he didn't say anything. In fact, he seemed to be enjoying it. The sovereign of numinous treasure. When they saw the sovereign of numinous treasure, the great emperor's gazes darkened. The sovereign of numinous treasure had looked like this for 10,000 years. Even after 10,000 years, his face hadn't changed in the slightest. He didn't bother to disguise his appearance when he met the few great emperors. Naturally, the few great emperors recognized him at first glance. Countless violent auras swirled around the hall. Even the Ocean Emperor's clone couldn't help but gulp. The great emperors were furious. He was truly afraid they'd attack the sovereign of numinous treasure right now. If they fought, the Shui family would suffer. Among the great emperors, Emperor Baiyan's emotions fluctuated the most. He crushed the armrests of his chair as if he didn't even realize it. You really have the guts to come see us? Heh, what's there to be afraid of? It's not like you guys can eat this exalted one up. The venerable of numinous treasure continued to speak in a provocative tone even though the an emperor was enraged. You were the one who boasted when I was outside, weren't you? The venerable of numinous treasure said disdainfully as he glanced at Lao Ai from head to toe. To be honest, you really can't do it. You, the Bai Wu great emperor was infuriated. Great Emperor Chao Feng, the Fox Empress, and the Jade Lake Palace Master were all frowning. Only the Hermit Emperor was watching the scene with a smile on his face. How arrogant! Great Emperor Bai An's eyes flashed with fury. I thought I was crazy enough, but you're far crazier than I am. It seems Shui Yang hasn't given you a good time in prison these past 10,000 years. In that case, I'll teach you a good lesson. You? Aren't you afraid that you'll bite your tongue? The venerable of numinous treasure said disdainfully. We'll know once we try. Rumble. The sky above the sea of innocence suddenly rumbled, and a faintly golden longsword descended into Great Emperor Bai An's hands, accompanied by a dragon's roar. The dragon's roar rumbled through the air, and an aura as heavy as a mountain filled the hall. In the face of this pressure, the venerable of numinous treasure didn't seem the least bit upset. He'd been locked up on the second floor for 10,000 years, and he'd endured the old demon emperor's violent aura for 10,000 years. If he'd even endured that level of suppression, what more from Bai An's great hall? His eyes flashed with golden light, and he stared fixedly at the hidden dragon's sword in Bai An's hands. Is that a God-given weapon in your hand? Before the venerable of numinous treasure had been imprisoned, Great Emperor Bai An hadn't yet acquired a God-given weapon. As soon as it appeared, the venerable of numinous treasure sensed its extraordinariness. He felt a sudden urge to devour it. Although the sword gave him a faint sense of danger, he couldn't control his restlessness. Just like when he devoured the Yaoxiling Pagoda and the Xianyuan sword. Even though he knew he couldn't withstand that kind of power, he still tried every possible way to steal and devour these two treasures. In the end, he didn't succeed. The Xianyuan sword's energy had caused his body to explode, and it took him 1,000 years to recover some of his vital energy. But he didn't regret it in the slightest. If given another chance, he wouldn't hesitate to try devouring again. The venerable of numinous treasure licked his lips, then looked at the hidden dragon's sword greedily. Noticing his gaze, Bai An subconsciously tightened his grip on the sword. This guy had left quite a shadow in his heart. He'd lost count of how many divine weapons the venerable of numinous treasure had devoured and refined. So what if I am, and so what if I'm not? Snorted Bai An. Hey, we're old acquaintances, so don't treat me like an outsider. The venerable of numinous treasure rubbed his hands together and laughed foolishly. It doesn't matter. How about we make a bet? We'll fight. If I lose, you can do whatever you want to me. If you lose, you have to give me the sword in your hand, deal? As soon as he finished speaking, the venerable of Lingbao spoke again. If you're worried, all of you can come at me together. I also know that all of you are here to seek revenge on me. If I lose, I'll let you do whatever you want to me. You can fry me or boil me into soup, whatever you want. If I win, I want this sword. The great emperors in the hall all knew exactly what kind of person the venerable of numinous treasure was. Since he'd dared to make such a bold claim, he had nothing to fear. Even if so many great emperors attacked him at the same time, he wouldn't be at a disadvantage. Moreover, his confrontation with the Ocean Empress was a perfect example. Back in the Sea of Innocence, the Ocean Empress had used her godhead's power, wielded the Sea God scepter, and wore the Sea God crown. Even after 300 years, she hadn't been able to break through his turtle shell. Even if all the great emperors joined forces, they wouldn't be able to break through. However, things were different now than they were 10,000 years ago. In the past 10,000 years, the great emperors had advanced by leaps and bounds. What's more, the venerable of numinous treasure had single-handedly challenged all of them, and his tone was filled with disdain. The great emperors already hated him for being so arrogant and despotic. How could they allow him to continue acting so arrogantly? Of course, the final decision lay in Anne's hands. At the end of the day, the Venerable of Numinous Treasure wanted his hidden dragon sword. If they lost, Anne would be the one to lose. The hidden dragon sword was bestowed upon him after he'd condensed his consciousness. To him, it was like a precious treasure. To use it as a gambling stake. Chapter 1580. At Anne's shout, the other great emperors rose from their seats. These great emperors were all peak experts of the three realms. It was no exaggeration to say that they could single-handedly destroy several cities. When several streams of divine power of this level intertwined, the resulting commotion was naturally unimaginable. The surging divine power caused the winds and clouds to churn, and the seas around Without Embroiling City surged into the sky. The citizens of Without Embroiling City narrowed their eyes at the sky. It was as if they'd been warned in advance. During this time, not a single person left the city. There were also quite a few rulers and diviner-level experts around the city. They unleashed their divine power and erected towering walls around Without Embroiling City. The world-destroying waves crashed against the walls, but they couldn't shake them in the slightest. Hey! At that moment, the Venerable of Numinous Treasure twisted his neck and stepped forward. To everyone's surprise, Yi Zichen didn't play the role of peacemaker. Instead, he moved to a corner of the hall just as they were about to attack. A black figure suddenly appeared beside him. It was none other than the Hermit Emperor and the Ocean Emperor. It seems Alliance Head Yi and the Ocean Emperor have reached some sort of tacit understanding? The Hermit Emperor smiled at Yi Zichen and the Ocean Emperor's clone, his eyes flashing with an indescribable light. The Ocean Emperor said nothing, but Yi Zichen cupped his hands and smiled. I had no choice. Actually, that's good. Numinous Treasure can intimidate Anne and the others a little. That way, the negotiations will be much more effective. Otherwise, given their accumulated grudges, it's practically impossible for them to sit down and have a proper chat, said the Hermit Emperor with a wise smile. I don't know how to explain the current situation. I don't understand. Yi Zichen and the Ocean Emperor narrowed their eyes. The Hermit Emperor was the oldest senior of the god race. As expected, his wisdom was terrifying. Letting the Venerable of Numinous Treasure cause trouble with Emperor Anne and the others was indeed part of Yi Zichen's and the Ocean Emperor's plan. The Ocean Emperor was well aware of just how much the Venerable of Numinous Treasure had provoked 10,000 years ago. Back then, he'd practically made the Four-Direction Palace his home. Every single treasure Anne obtained would fall into his hands. Such enmity was not something that could be resolved with just a few words. If the Venerable of Numinous Treasure showed a little of his skills and let the great emperors know that they couldn't do anything to him, it would be much easier to discuss the future matters with this premise. No one had told the Hermit Emperor about this beforehand, but he was able to deduce that. How could they not be amazed? In contrast to Yi Zichen and the Ocean Emperor's steadiness, Pu Jingwan couldn't keep her cool at all. She was so shocked that she couldn't close her mouth after hearing the Hermit Emperor reveal their entire plan. How did you know? The Hermit Emperor smiled mysteriously but didn't say anything. Instead, he looked at the Venerable of Numinous Treasure, who was still walking forward despite the pressure from the great emperors. Looks like the Venerable of Lingbao's realm has improved a lot in the past 10,000 years. What realm is it now? He's already above Zhou, the Ocean Sovereign said. Since everyone could see through it, there was nothing to hide. Moreover, there was no enmity between the Hermit Emperor and the Venerable of Numinous Treasure. Speaking of which, it was strange. In the past, he had stolen from Numinous Treasure Venerable, Celestial, Yao, and Demon races peak great emperors. It just so happened that the Hermit Emperor had never taken even half a step into his realm. He really is a peerless genius. The Hermit Emperor nodded, seemingly gratified. Yi Zichen and the Ocean Sovereign couldn't help but frown. At the same time, the venerable of numinous treasure, was only 10 meters away from the great emperors. Even now, his expression was frivolous, and his eyes gleamed with greed as he gazed at Bai An's hidden dragon sword. "I want that sword," said the venerable. I'm just afraid you'll shrink back into your shell when the time comes. I'm not as good-tempered as Shui Yang. All I'm doing is detain you for 10,000 years. Snorted Bai An. Is that so? Boom. As soon as he said that, the venerable of numinous treasure's lazy gaze suddenly focused. Instantly, an aura like that of a ferocious beast swept out from his body. The instant his aura appeared, the combined pressure of the great emperors was torn to shreds like paper. The domains they'd released instantly shattered as well. He's actually reached this level? The ocean sovereign reached out and summoned a curtain of water, blocking out the venerable of numinous treasure's divine power. In truth, the venerable of numinous treasure hadn't extended his aura to them on purpose, and the ocean sovereign had simply blocked the white steam created by his divine power. Otherwise, given the ocean sovereign's cultivation, how could he possibly withstand the venerable of numinous treasure's all-out attack? The great emperor's pupils constricted. They'd never guessed that the venerable of numinous treasure, who'd been at the same cultivation level as them 10,000 years ago, would suddenly widen the gap between them by such a wide margin. Hadn't he been locked up in the Shui family's dungeons all this time? "I'll gladly accept your divine artifact." He laughed and took the hidden dragon sword from Emperor Bai An's hands. During this time, Bai An hadn't resisted in the slightest. He didn't have the time or energy to care about such things. Just the venerable of numinous treasure's aura alone made him feel like several mountains were pressing down on his head. The hidden dragon sword fell into the venerable of numinous treasure's hands without any resistance, but at that moment, "Stop!" Yi Zichen, who'd been watching from the sidelines this entire time, couldn't just sit back and watch. He frowned and ran up to the venerable of numinous treasure. "Return the hidden dragon's sword to Emperor Bai An." "Why? I won it with my own abilities." By now, the venerable of numinous treasure's aura had dissipated. Bai An and the others heaved a sigh of relief. Empress Su Qinyan, Emperor Chao Feng, and the Jade Lake Palace head furrowed their brows at the venerable of numinous treasure. Emperor Bai An's eyes were bloodshot. "Give me back the hidden dragon sword." "Hey Bai An, I don't remember you being such a scoundrel back then. We clearly agreed that if I won, the sword would belong to me. Why are you acting like a scoundrel now?" The venerable of numinous treasure glared at him. Yi Zichen frowned. "Give it back." "I'm not giving it back, this is my big sister Xiang." Yi Zichen didn't waste any more words. He summoned Xianyuan Xiang. Instantly, the arrogant venerable of numinous treasure drooped his head, as if he'd met his nemesis. "Give it back." "Very good." Chapter 1581. The venerable of numinous treasure could not help but laugh foolishly. It was enough for him to experience the feeling of having his body explode once in his life. That experience alone was enough for him to remember it for the rest of his life. Even now, when he saw Xianyuan Xiang, he couldn't help but think of the scene of her exploding with energy. He thought back to when he swallowed the Xianyuan sword all those years ago. The enormous energy had burst his body. It was broken into pieces. All of a sudden, the venerable of numinous treasure could not help but shudder. He shook his head to get rid of the memory of the explosion from his mind, then rubbed his hands together and bowed to Xianyuan Xiang. "No problem, whatever you say, Sister Xiang. What I want is not for me to say it, but for him to say whatever he says." Xianyuan Xiang pointed towards Yi Zichen. The Lord of numinous treasure quickly nodded. "All right, Alliance Head Yi will be the sky from now on. I'll do whatever he tells me to do. If he tells me to go east, I'll never go west. If he tells me to slaughter a dog, I'll never kill a chicken." Woof, woof, woof. The howling celestial dog lying beside Yang Jian suddenly barked a few times uncomfortably. "You should behave now. If you run around again and see that big boss, I'll catch you and make you into dog stew. Let me tell you, I can't beat him. Yang Jian looked at the howling celestial hound. Where did this silly dog run off to recently? It was obviously Yang Jian's spirit beast. Ever since he had helped it evolve, he would always disappear without a trace for no reason. After 10 days or half a month, he would come back with a body full of injuries. Yang Jian's heart ached as he looked at it. He asked it how it did it, but it just hung its head and didn't say anything. After he healed it, the silly dog would run away inexplicably and come back with a body full of injuries. Right now, the howling celestial dog was lying by Yang Jian's side. It had only returned after it was injured. In order to treat its injuries, Yang Jian had asked Yi Zichen for quite a few divine pills and spiritual medicines. Woof, woof! The howling celestial hound wagged its tail and barked a few more times. A gentle light flashed in Yang Jian's eyes as he squatted down and stroked its fur. Under the pitch-black fur, there were many wounds where the bones could be seen. He couldn't help but feel heartache as he scolded the howling celestial hound for getting what it deserved. Next time, bring it to me. Whoever hurt you, I'll skin him alive. At least you're tactful. While Yang Jian was feeling sorry for the celestial hound, Xianyuan Xiang nodded at the venerable of numinous treasure with satisfaction. The great emperors in the hall were shocked. The venerable of numinous treasure's aura was stronger than Zhou Wu and Kuei Lin's. As for whether he was as strong as Dong Huangtai, no one knew. In their memories, Dong Huangtai had already revealed his power for 10,000 years. It was just that the strongest of the 3 emperors back then, after 10,000 years of accumulation, his realm would definitely rise along with the tide. The venerable of numinous treasure, who was at such a high level, smiled apologetically in front of Xianyuan Xiang. All the great emperors knew that he had once swallowed the Xianyuan sword and exploded, but it was unbelievable that he would be so afraid when he saw her. Xianyuan Xiang took a few deep glances at him, then turned to Yi Zichen. Don't worry, I'll be fine. I won't stay here any longer. Recently, I've sensed something strange about the godhead you gave me. I'll return to the sword and study it. Of course, if that toad dares oppose you again, come find me. I'll definitely let him enjoy the pleasure of exploding. Sorry to trouble you, big sister Xiang. Xianyuan Xiang nodded, then returned to the Xianyuan sword. The venerable of numinous treasure obediently stood behind Yi Zichen. Although he still looked at the great emperors with an unfriendly gaze, he didn't dare act rashly. This behavior puzzled the great emperors. Empress Su Qinyan furrowed her brows and said, Star Lord Yi, don't you think you need to explain yourself? The great emperors sensed that the venerable of numinous treasure's relationship with Yi Zichen was unusual. When they looked over, they saw Yi Zichen bow deeply, cupping his hands in greeting. Great emperors, please calm your anger. Shui Yang, you're actually in cahoots with Star Lord Yi, aren't you? Said the Jade Lake Palace Master. The Ocean Emperor said nothing, but Yi Zichen chuckled. Emperors, please don't overthink it. The Ocean Empress and I are well aware of the deep grudges between you and the venerable of numinous treasure. That's why I didn't say anything to stop you earlier and wanted everyone to vent their anger. Vent your anger? Are you trying to intimidate us? Great Emperor Bian snorted. Emperor Bian is being too serious. Yi Zichen smiled wryly. We're allies of the same alliance. How could we purposely make things difficult for you guys? If the emperors had subdued the venerable of numinous treasure, the Ocean Emperor and I definitely wouldn't have interceded on his behalf. He deserved it. At the very most, when he was trapped in a mess, we will plead on his behalf and ask the great emperors to spare his life. You're thinking too much. Just the few of them, the venerable of Lingbao said disdainfully. In the blink of an eye, the great emperors' faces turned hostile. They were all high and mighty emperor experts. It was already very embarrassing that they could not subdue Lingbao Venerable after joining hands. Now that Lingbao Venerable was speaking so disdainfully, the few great emperors felt embarrassed. Shut up. When Yi Zichen saw the great emperor's anger rise again, he turned to the venerable of numinous treasure and shouted. The venerable of numinous treasure was somewhat displeased at being scolded like this, but when he remembered that big sister Xiang was by Yi Zichen's side, he didn't dare show his displeasure. Hey! Yi Zichen lowered his head and replied, then turned to the great emperors and said, Great emperors, please don't get angry. I know how you feel about him, but you saw it for yourself just now. In truth, even if you're angry, there's nothing you can do about it. As expected, you're trying to intimidate us. Snorted Bayan, that's absolutely not what I meant, but if that's what you think, then I don't want to explain myself. Yi Zichen sighed. Star Lord Yi, this is no fun, said Great Emperor Chao Feng, narrowing his eyes. What are you doing? We're all members of the alliance. Why get so worked up over something so trivial? Said the Hermit Emperor, acting as a mediator. You all know full well what kind of person Star Lord Yi is. There's no need for him to make things difficult for you. Don't you agree? What's more, you want to hear Star Lord Yi out before you make a decision, right? Then tell us, said Bayan. The Hermit Emperor smiled at Yi Zichen and indicated for him to continue. Yi Zichen nodded at him, then turned to the fuming Great Emperor Bayan. Actually, what I wanted to say was that if the Venerable of Numinous Treasure joins us, what do you think? Absolutely not, said Great Emperor Bayan. He can join us if he wants, but I can at least withdraw. Chapter 1582. The palace glowed with golden light. A dazzling array of treasures hovered in the center of the palace. When the great emperors saw them, they couldn't hide their astonishment. These. The Jade Lake Palace master stared at the divine artifacts in a daze. Quite a few of them had been stolen, devoured, and branded by the Venerable of Numinous Treasure. This is my violet silk satin. This is Wan Er's Winchim. This is. The great emperors named the divine weapons in the hall one by one. These were the divine weapons that the Venerable of Lingbao had stolen from them previously. The great emperors didn't quite understand, but Emperor Bayan, who was just about to leave, frowned. Star Lord Yi, are you trying to embarrass us? Yi Zichen was instantly dumbfounded. The Venerable of Numinous Treasure had naturally released these divine artifacts at Yi Zichen's behest. In order to convince him, Yi Zichen had cooperated with Xianyuan Xiang and talked for a full 3 days before he finally nodded. Yi Zichen's original intention was for the Venerable of Numinous Treasure to return the divine artifacts to the great emperors and ease the tension between the Venerable of Numinous Treasure and the great emperors. Emperor Bai'an's words terrified him. Emperor Bai'an, He, you release the god artifact that Xing Jing stole from me. Are you trying to embarrass us on purpose? Could it be that this is part of Star Lord Ye's plan as well? Are you trying to tell us that we couldn't do anything to him 10,000 years ago, and that we should back off? Emperor Bai'an gnashed his teeth. Yi Zichen couldn't quite understand Emperor Bai'an's words, but he could see that the misunderstanding was growing deeper and deeper. In response, Yi Zichen couldn't help but arch his brows. Great Emperor, why do you say that? Am I wrong? Roared Emperor Bai'an angrily. From the moment he entered the palace until now, it's clear that what you're trying to tell us is that the Venerable of Numinous Treasure is already on your side, Star Lord Yi. Then you'll let us know that even if we joined forces, we couldn't do anything to him. Now you're releasing these divine artifacts? You're trying to tell us that he was stronger than us 10,000 years ago, right? No! It was obvious that Great Emperor Bai'an had completely misunderstood Yi Zichen's meaning. However, he didn't give Yi Zichen any chance to explain himself. Star Lord Yi, is it really worth it to humiliate us like this for a guy who was infamous 10,000 years ago, even if his cultivation is high? Alright, since you want to be associated with it, then I'm sorry, but from now on Wait, stop! When Yi Zichen saw that Great Emperor Bai'an's words were going from bad to worse, he hurriedly interrupted him. Emperor Bai'an, you've misunderstood. Misunderstanding? Bayan raised an eyebrow. That's right. The Venerable of Numinous Treasure released these artifacts to return them to you. I said it before, the Lord of Numinous Treasure came with sincerity. Why would you think that? Yi Zichen said helplessly. What? When he heard that, Bayan froze. He stared blankly at Yi Zichen, then at the Venerable of Numinous Treasure. How could this be? The reason why he had such a thought before was because he knew that the Venerable of Numinous Treasure could not return the treasures to them. So long as they were in his hands, even if you held a knife to his neck, he wouldn't be able to spit them out. Take the 5 Elements Great Emperor for example. The Venerable of Numinous Treasure stole a spiritual artifact from him. That spiritual artifact was a token of love between the 5 Elements Great Emperor and Empress Su Qingyan. In exchange for it, the 5 Elements Great Emperor agreed to give the Venerable of Numinous Treasure 5 divine artifacts. Even so, the Venerable of Numinous Treasure refused and even set his sights on the Yaoxiling Pagoda. However, the 5 Elements Great Emperor, Empress Su Qingyan, and the Fox clan head, Su Wan beat him up several times before he gave up on the Yaoxiling Pagoda. Even so, he never returned the token of love. This was the sort of person who'd rather die than spit out the treasures he'd swallowed. Now he was saying he wanted to return the divine artifacts? Even the great Emperor Bayan suspected he was hearing things. I'm telling the truth, said Yi Zichen, shrugging. Yi Zichen shrugged. These are all divine artifacts the Sovereign of Numinous Treasure stole from you all those years ago. Every single one of them is here. In consideration of the fact that you've all advanced in cultivation over the past 10,000 years, the Venerable of Numinous Treasure is willing to give you a few more divine artifacts as compensation. Can you take away all the divine weapons placed here? Then returning the divine artifacts was purely a discussion between the Sea Emperor and the Venerable of Numinous Treasure. The Sea Emperor had no idea. When she heard Yi Zichen say this, she hurriedly took a few steps forward. After all, her sea god ring was still in the Venerable of Numinous Treasure's hands. Of course, I have your sea god ring as well. With a flip of his hand, Yi Zichen produced a sky-blue ring and a water pearl. Here's your sea god ring, and this pearl is the Venerable of Numinous Treasure's compensation. The Venerable of Numinous Treasure said himself that this pearl can increase your sea god set's power by 20%. The Sea Emperor's clone accepted the ring and pearl in a daze. As soon as the pearl entered his hand, he sensed the surging water divine power contained within. It was also very compatible with his own divine power. You've really lucked out. I took this pearl from the frozen lake of the West Sea. The other great emperors took back their divine artifacts as well. Great Emperor Bayan had reaped a bountiful harvest. He'd earned over 30 divine artifacts. From this, it was clear just how long the Venerable of Numinous Treasure had been hiding in the Four-Direction Palace. The Venerable of Lingbao could not hide the pain in his eyes when all the divine artifacts in the hall were swept away. It could be said that he had spent half of his life to collect these divine artifacts, but now they were all gone. However, Yi Zichen also promised that he'd make up for his losses. In truth, he'd already absorbed the core divine power of those divine artifacts. At most, he'd only be able to use them as ornaments. When he thought of this, he felt a bit better. Are you satisfied, great emperors? I'm truly grateful that you've returned this jade hairpin. Empress Su Qingyan clutched a jade hairpin and bowed deeply to the Venerable of Numinous Treasure. This hairpin was the token of love the 5 Elements Great Emperor had given her. She'd been so angry at Numinous Treasure because of this hairpin. Now that she'd regained it, the 5 Elements Great Emperor was no longer in this world. Looking at this jade hairpin, she felt a bit nostalgic. I have nothing to say, said the Jade Lake Palace Master. Me too, said Great Emperor Chaofeng. My true body and I are willing to write off our past grievances with the Venerable of Numinous Treasure, said the Sea Emperor's clone. At the same time, 3 divine artifacts appeared in his hands. They flew through the air and landed in front of the venerable of numinous treasure. You gave me this pearl, so I'm willing to give you these 3 divine artifacts in return. The Sea Emperor is still the brightest. The venerable of numinous treasure grinned. He'd given away so many divine artifacts. Even though he was the venerable of numinous treasure, his heart ached. Although the Sea Emperor's 3 divine artifacts weren't particularly good, they'd at least cut his losses. Chapter 1583. As the saying goes, one's hands are tied. Even the great emperors were happy to hear that. Their grudge with the venerable of numinous treasure stemmed from his theft of their divine artifact. Now that they'd all been returned to them, even though they'd originally belonged to them, the venerable of numinous treasure was the one who'd returned them. Their enmity had lessened considerably. If they went overboard, it would indeed be inexcusable. Furthermore, they'd received other divine artifacts as compensation. Especially the Ocean Emperor. The complete set of the sea gods set had fallen into his hands. In addition, he'd received a water resistance pearl that could increase the set's combat strength by 20%. What did a 20% increase in combat strength mean? In the ocean, even Zhou Wu was nothing more than a chicken or a stray dog. However, the one in the most difficult situation was actually Great Emperor Baiyan. Because the venerable of numinous treasure had taken care of him the most, he'd almost lost his head in anger. Now that he'd returned all his divine artifacts and received several more as compensation, he didn't know what to do. His earlier words had been too vicious, and there was practically no room for negotiation. Didn't you want to withdraw? Hurry up and leave. It just so happens I'm having a headache just looking at you. The venerable of numinous treasure rolled his eyes. The other great emperors had only returned a small amount of divine artifacts, but this Baiyan, he'd returned a few dozen, and tossed in a dozen more. These divine items were his lifeblood. Now that he saw the Baiyan immortal emperor, he couldn't help but feel angry. The venerable of numinous treasure. Yi Zichen knit his brows. Since Emperor Baiyan had accepted the divine artifacts, that naturally meant he'd tacitly accepted the venerable of numinous treasure. Now, the venerable of numinous treasure was still bickering. If Emperor Baiyan really left in a fit of rage, the losses would outweigh the gains. The venerable of numinous treasure rubbed his nose. Yi Zichen cupped his hands at Emperor Baiyan. Great Emperor, look, your enmity with the venerable of numinous treasure was merely a dispute over divine artifacts. Now that you've returned all the divine artifacts, there's no more enmity between you. How about we call it quits? We're in the God realm, and Zhou Wu is itching to attack us. Outside, the Yaoan demons have joined forces. Our grand alliance must unite as one in order to contend against them. Besides, the venerable of Lingbao has a profound realm, so he can be of great help to us. I know that Baiyan Heavenly Emperor is a magnanimous person, so I won't make a fuss about it. Don't you think so? Yi Zichen chuckled. He'd given Great Emperor Baiyan plenty of face. It was just as Yi Zichen had said. The main grudge between Great Emperor Baiyan and the venerable of numinous treasure was over divine artifacts. What angered Emperor Baiyan the most was that the venerable of numinous treasure had lived in the Four-Direction Palace for several hundred years. Whenever he obtained a divine artifact, the venerable of numinous treasure would steal it. As time passed, the accumulated resentment grew deeper and deeper. Now that all the artifacts had been returned, there were no more grudges between him and the venerable one of Lingbao. Since Yi Zichen had given him a way out, Great Emperor Baiyan no longer put on airs. He nodded, snorted, and acknowledged the venerable of numinous treasure's participation. Everyone is happy, haha. The Hermit Emperor walked out and stood between the venerable of numinous treasure and the Baiyan Emperor. Then, he gave the Ocean Sovereign a meaningful glance, and the Ocean Sovereign immediately understood. It wasn't easy for all of you great emperors to gather here. Now that numinous treasure's grudge with us has been settled, and with such a powerful ally joining our alliance has grown even stronger. Why don't you take advantage of this opportunity to stay in the Sea of Innocence for a few days and drink to your heart's content? Drinking? I like it, laughed the Venerable of Numinous Treasure. Half a month passed in the blink of an eye. The great emperors all had official business to attend to, and given the current tumultuous situation, it wasn't appropriate for them to leave their factions for too long. The Venerable of Numinous Treasure didn't encounter any resistance. During this time, Yi Zichen even added him to the war preparations group. From time to time, he'd see the Venerable of Numinous Treasure joking around with the other great emperors. He didn't seem at all like he'd been fighting to the death half a month ago. Yi Zichen, Yang Jian, Pu Jingwan, and the Venerable of Numinous Treasure stood at the entrance to the second floor of the Shui family's prison. At this time, they had just come up from the second floor of the dungeon. Although there was a restriction between the first and second floor, they could still feel the terrifying and furious pressure from below. It seems the one down there is still quite irritable. Yi Zichen sighed. In the past half a month, he'd already been to the dungeons 5 times. Whether it was in the wee hours of the morning, noon, evening, or deep into the night, the Demon Emperor's emotions were never particularly stable. From time to time, he'd fly into a rage. Quite a few general-level experts on the second floor were so frightened by his aura that they aged considerably. Yi Zichen couldn't get in touch with the Demon Emperor, which made him extremely anxious. Part of the words left behind by the Master of the Outer Realms Star was about the old Demon Emperor, and the other part was about the end of the era. Before the end of the era, he had to get in touch with the Demon Emperor. Time was of the essence, and he was filled with worry. How about I just take you down there? No matter how high that old guy's cultivation is, he can't do anything to me, said the Venerable of Numinous Treasure. No. Yi Zichen shook his head. If he wanted to get in touch with the Demon Emperor, he had to wait until his emotions were stable. He didn't just want to confirm that the person down there was the Demon Emperor. He wanted to communicate with the Demon Emperor and reach some sort of consensus. This required both emotional stability and absolute clarity of thought. Otherwise, even if he went, he wouldn't be able to make any substantial progress. If you don't need it, then forget it. I'm more than happy to relax. The Venerable of Numinous Treasure shrugged. To tell you the truth, if I really had to face that old man, even my legs would tremble. Since you don't need me to take you down there by force, and it seems we can't go down there today anyway, let's go. Yi Zichen nodded and left the dungeon. As soon as he left, they saw the great sage, who'd been missing for half a month, leaning on his staff as he waited anxiously outside the dungeon. When Yang Jian and the others saw him, they were speechless. The Venerable of Numinous Treasure looked him up and down curiously. You're out. At that moment, the great sage smiled and walked over. He glanced at the Venerable of Numinous Treasure and asked, So this is the Demon Emperor? Monkey, what are you talking about? Yang Jian rolled his eyes. This is the Venerable of the second floor of the dungeon, and the Demon Emperor. What are you doing here? Putting on an act? Where'd you run off to for the past half-month? Didn't you say you should go down if something happened? If something really happened, you probably wouldn't even know. You already know. The great sage laughed awkwardly and scratched his head. Did you think we'd been in there for half a month? Yang Jian was speechless. Yi Zichen patted him on the shoulder and signaled for him to stop talking, then turned to the great sage. Where'd you go for the past half-month? I sent you messages, but you didn't reply. You sent me messages? The great sage froze, then took out his phone and glanced at his chat window. Yang Jian, Yi Zichen, and Pu Jingwan had all sent him quite a few messages. The great sage chuckled and scratched his head. I wasn't paying attention. Chapter 1584. For better or for worse, Yi Zichen could be considered half a son-in-law of the Sea of Innocence. Furthermore, given his status, the Ocean Emperor had prepared a place for him, Yang Jian, and the others to stay, and their rooms were adjacent. Meanwhile, the great sage, Yang Jian, and Pu Jingwan stood by the window. The three of them were huddled together, looking at who knew what, but from time to time, they giggled foolishly. The venerable of numinous treasure sat in his chair, fiddling with a low-grade divine artifact Yi Zichen had taken from the Yaoxiling pagoda. "You guys sure know how to slack off." Yi Zichen walked in, carrying 2 jugs of wine. This was the Ocean Emperor's prized possession, and he normally couldn't bear to drink it. However, he'd recently regained the Sea God's Ring, as well as the Water Resistance Pearl. The Ocean Emperor was overjoyed, so Yi Zichen took advantage of the opportunity to grab 2 more jugs and give them to the great sage. As for the others, they'd already drunk quite a bit during the great Emperor's gathering. As soon as they entered the room, the great sage wrinkled his nose and glanced at Yi Zichen. The venerable of numinous treasure was even faster. Even Yang Jian and the others didn't see how he'd move. By the time they came to their senses, a jug of wine was in his hands. He leaned against the wall and drank by himself. From the looks of it, he had no intention of sharing it with anyone else. "What kind of treasure is this?" The great sage blinked curiously. Yang Jian and Pu Jingwan licked their lip. Although they'd all drunk it before, it was precisely because they'd drunk it that their mouths watered. "This is what the Ocean Emperor got from the Sea of Innocence." "What kind of essence did she get?" Yi Zichen's mind suddenly went blank. "Who cares what essence it is? As long as it's good wine, that's all." Yang Jian took out a few cups and placed them on the table. He picked up the jug and filled them to the brim, then downed them all in one gulp. As the wine entered his stomach, even at Yang Jian's cultivation, he looked slightly tipsy. "This wine." The great sage was amazed. He looked at the wine in the jade cup and drank it without hesitation. "Good wine." Yi Zichen glanced at the others, then couldn't help but lick his lips. The wine was a thick, milky white liquid, and its aroma filled the room. Just smelling it made his blood flow faster. He picked up the wine cup and gently placed it on the tip of his nose. As the fragrance of the wine entered his nose, he immediately felt refreshed, and his pores opened up involuntarily. Gulp. The nectar tasted slightly sweet. When the wine entered his stomach, he couldn't help but feel a warm current slowly flowing in his chest. It flowed through all the meridians in his body and made the divine power in his body more active. Even though it wasn't his first time tasting this wine, it still left a lingering aftertaste in his mouth. The entire jug of wine was emptied after 2 cups. At that moment, the great sage was still pouring the last few drops of wine into his mouth. "Brother, where did you get this wine from? Do you have any more?" the great sage asked. "Didn't I tell you that this is the Sea Empress collection?" Recently, he was in a good mood, so he gave him a few more pots. "But from the looks of it, these are the last few pots. I don't think he'll be able to deliver any more," Yi Zichen shrugged. "If he doesn't give it to us, can't we go get it ourselves?" The great sage put down the wine flask and slammed the table. "It's not like you've just met me, old Sunday. Everyone in the heavenly court knows what I, old son, do. Do you know where he's hiding it? I'll definitely steal it back for you. Isn't that right?" "We can just steal it back," agreed the venerable of numinous treasure. However, as soon as he said that, he sensed something was amiss. He looked at the great sage and said, "What, steal? This is called stealing. Stealing sounds so bad. You sound like a thief." "Oh, we're kindred spirits," laughed the great sage. When he heard that, Yi Zichen couldn't help but facepalm. How did he let these two run into each other? Back when the great sage wreaked havoc in the heavenly court, during the Immortality Peach Banquet, he'd nearly stolen all the offerings from the auction house and taken them all to Mount Huagua. The venerable of numinous treasure was even more so. He'd set his sights on every major expert of the upper 3 realms. Both of them were masters of treasure hunting. If the 2 of them ran into each other and formed a team, even the 3 emperors wouldn't let even an inch of their treasures leave their hands. "You two, stop messing around," said Yi Zichen righteously. The Sea Empress has treated us well. Besides, we're staying with her, so no matter what, we can't attack her. What about the others? Asked the Venerable of Numinous Treasure. Let me tell you, these great emperors all have some sort of treasure in their possession. Things like ambrosia and divine fruits? Let's keep an eye out for them in the future. If there's any news, we can go get some. It'll be a good opportunity for me to test out your skills. When it comes to treasure hunting, I've never been afraid of anyone. What a coincidence. Me too. Although they'd only met for less than 4 hours, the great sage and the Venerable of Numinous Treasure felt like they regretted not having met earlier. Yi Zichen clutched his head in exasperation. He could already imagine the chaos the upper 3 realms would face in the future. However, in truth, this wasn't necessarily a bad thing. Not everyone in the upper 3 realms was their ally. With the great sage and the Venerable of Numinous Treasure around, anyone who dared to go against them would be robbed of all their belongings. This was especially true of the God Emperor Zhou Wu and the Demon Emperor Kuei Lin. Their treasures were absolutely frightening. If he could take all their treasures, wouldn't that be awesome? When he thought about it, even Yi Zichen was tempted. However, he quickly discarded the thought. He was a righteous person. How could he do something so sneaky? But desperate times called for desperate measures. He grinned foolishly for a while, but when he came to his senses, he saw that the others were sitting in their chairs, propping their cheeks in their hands as they discussed his every move. He's definitely up to no good. Look at him. He's drooling. Normally, he was under too much pressure. Even daydreaming wouldn't hurt. That was how Yi Zichen comforted himself. However, he couldn't lose his imposing aura in front of them. He hurriedly coughed and wiped the corners of his mouth. I'm telling you, don't even think about doing something like that. Especially you, the Venerable of Numinous Treasure. You know better than anyone how you've spent the past 10,000 years. Besides, we're the masters of justice. We can't go down that path, Yi Zichen said righteously. The Venerable of Numinous Treasure understood. Just now, you were imagining us taking treasures, and here I thought it was something else. Don't think too much about it. Even if we went, we wouldn't give you what we took. Who wants to take treasures? Don't bother explaining. Explaining is just covering up, and covering up is an indisputable fact, said the Venerable of Numinous Treasure. When he saw his smug expression, Yi Zichen couldn't be bothered to bicker with him. Chapter 1585. The great sage's words stunned Yi Zichen. He thought back to the red packet server on his phone and realized that it had been far too long since he'd read their messages. The red packet server he'd set up was right above the chat window. In truth, Yi Zichen could see the group's messages every day, but he'd never clicked on them. The situation in the upper 3 realms was already like this. Aside from chatting with the great emperors, Yi Zichen rarely had the time to lurk in the red packet server and watch the immortals banter. Back in the modern realm, Yi Zichen loved lurking in the group and snatching up red packets from time to time. However, when he was truly imprisoned, the reincarnation of the Yellow Emperor and the invasion of the demons sealed the modern realm in ice. He rarely interacted with the other immortals. He barely even had time to lurk in and watch them chat. He simply had too many things to deal with, so much so that he'd neglected his old friends, who'd once brought him endless joy. When the great sage mentioned the red packet server, Yi Zichen couldn't help but reflect. He slowly took out his phone and opened the red packet server. The group was the same as usual. Just like before, the immortals of the heavenly court and underworld chatted in groups of 2s and 3s. However, from the looks of it, the messages weren't moving as fast as before. That was understandable. The immortals who'd always liked to chat had all ascended. Take Yang Jian and the great sage for example. They'd been frequent visitors to the group, but now they had to stick by Yi Zichen's side and take care of matters, big and small. Only idealism. Are you all well? Yi Zichen wanted to liven up the group's mood, so he sent a message. To his surprise, when he'd sent a message in the past, it was no exaggeration to say that several hundred messages popped up in the blink of an eye. However, this time, even though his message popped up, it didn't explode the immortals who'd never spoken up. Immortality Peach Fairy. Big brother, long time no see. I miss you. A row of tearful emojis. Barefoot Immortal. Emperor Yi, why do you have time to speak up? Wu Gang. Love rival. Give me back Chong Yi. Furious, furious, furious. After that, the heavenly soldiers replied in the group chat. As for the Thunder God, the Lightning Mother, the 10 Yama Kings, Oxhead, Horseface, and the black and white impermanents who often appeared in the group chat in the past, they did not appear in the group chat. That was strange. Yi Zichen was very surprised at how quiet the group was. He subconsciously looked towards the Great Sage. The Great Sage just said that he went to the Heavenly Court. Could something have happened in the Heavenly Court? He didn't believe it, so he sent another red packet in the group. Yi Zichen's red packets were wiped clean in an instant. When he clicked on the red packets to see how lucky everyone else was, he instantly lost his cool. The people on it were all heavenly soldiers and ghost servants. Occasionally, a few immortals with immortal positions could be seen. However, the great immortals who used to spam in the group had yet to appear. Immortality Peach Fairy. Wow, a red packet. It's been a long time since someone sent a red packet in the group. Immortality Peach Fairy. Thank you, big brother. Wu Gang. Give me back my Chong Yi. Even though there were very few people who received red packets, Yi Zichen frowned, then tagged Immortality Peach Fairy. Only idealism. Immortality Peach Fairy, why is the group so quiet? Did something happen in the Heavenly Court and Underworld? Immortality Peach Fairy. Everyone ascended. Only idealism. They all ascended? Queen Mother. Emperor Yi, what a rare guest. I didn't expect to see you here. Only idealism. Queen Mother. Barefoot Immortal. It's not the Queen Mother anymore. She's now the commander of the Heavenly Court and Underworld. Only idealism, huh? Yi Zichen was dumbfounded. Previously, the North Pole Emperor had been in charge of the Heavenly Court, and the North Fengdu Emperor had been in charge of the Underworld. How long had it been? Now the Queen Mother had become the commander of both sides? What was going on? The amount of information was astonishing. Yi Zichen found it hard to digest. After a while, he sent the message. Only idealism. The Queen Mother has become the commander of both sides. Then the North Pole Emperor and the North Fengdu Emperor. Queen Mother, they've all ascended. Queen Mother, it's not just them. The God of Thunder, Mother of Lightning, Oxhead, Horseface, Black and White Impermanence, the 10 Yama Kings. All the great immortals have ascended. Queen Mother. That's all the immortals left in the Heavenly Court and Underworld. They're basically 2 empty shells. Queen Mother, as a commander, I'm really... The Queen Mother couldn't help but sigh. So many great immortals ascending really wasn't a good thing for her, the new commander. The 2 realms' management was lacking. If they didn't properly appoint a new leader, it was no exaggeration to say that the 2 realms' operations would collapse. The Queen Mother was naturally worried about who would fill the new management positions, but so many immortals ascending. It was a little strange. It wasn't that Yi Zichen hadn't returned to the lower realms before. Back when he'd spent the night drinking with the God of Thunder and the others, he could tell from their auras that they hadn't even reached the Immortal King level yet. In less than 3 years, they'd broken through from Sky Immortal to Immortal King, then ascended. Even with the density of spiritual energy in the upper 3 realms, it was difficult to achieve such a rapid rise in cultivation. Great Sage, what's going on down there? Yi Zichen glanced at the Great Sage, then hurriedly replied. Only idealism. Have they all ascended? Queen Mother, probably. Whether it's the Heavenly Court, the Underworld, the Immortal Region, or the Endless Beast Region, quite a few experts have ascended to the Upper and Yao realms as well, and the trend hasn't slowed down at all. Queen Mother. If this continues, the heavenly court and the underworld will completely collapse. Queen Mother, I sent someone to ask the great sage to come down, but even with his vast knowledge, he wasn't able to find out what was going on. Immortality Peach Fairy. Most of the fairy maidens from the Immortality Peach Garden have left, and Neza doesn't say anything in the group anymore. Life in the group is super boring. Kitchen God, it's so free. I don't even need to prepare dinner for those great immortals. Heavenly Soldier A. It's been 13 days since Commander Lei ascended. I miss him. Heavenly Soldier B. After Yu Lao left, his disciples messed up marriage fates. Right now, all of the realm's fates are in a mess. There are triangles, 4 corners, and 5 corners relationships everywhere. Ghost Enforcer A. Because of this, who knows how many people have died. Even the underworld's mission is too heavy. Ghost Enforcer A. But the King of Yama of the underworld hasn't been chosen yet, so we don't know what to do with those ghosts. Queen Mother of the West, I hope that you can quickly choose a judge for the underworld. Chapter 1586. Just from the words on the screen, Yi Zichen felt like he could sense the Queen Mother's serenity. Despite her peaceful temperament, she'd said something about loneliness in the group. Presumably, she also felt sad about the bleakness of the heavenly court and underworld. The old people had left. The heavenly court and underworld were no longer as noisy as before. The entire heavenly palace was like a dead city. The number of female immortals had decreased by 50%, and the number of immortals with immortal positions had decreased by 70%. Practically no one lived in the immortal residences above the 12th layer. Could this heavenly palace really be considered a heavenly palace? Inexplicably, the Queen Mother shook her head and left the group. She looked at the heavenly court, which was still bathed in rosy light. She couldn't help but miss the days when the great sage and the others were still around and the heavenly court was in chaos. Let's go. They're all gone. She shook her head and sighed. Then she rode off on a cloud. How could she not feel lonely? Even the profound maiden of the 9 heavens had left. She looked around the entire heavenly palace, but there was no one she could confide in. Queen Mother of the West's bitterness also caused the people who stayed in the group to let out mournful cries. The Immortality Peach Fairy sighed as she watched her colleagues leave her side. The kitchen god mocked himself as he said what was the use of his skills. The Barefoot Immortal had also witnessed the rise and fall of the Red Packet server. He watched as the Red Packet server became a dead group. Everyone in the group sighed with regret. Yi Zichen couldn't help but frown as he read the messages. The spiritual energy of the 3 lower realms was too dense for them to increase their cultivation by such a large margin. Even Yi Zichen couldn't help but feel sad when he saw the desolation in the group. Their sudden increase in cultivation was naturally a good thing. Yi Zichen was happy for them. However, this sudden increase was too strange, and it severely affected the operations of the heavenly court and underworld. From the looks of it, this wasn't a good thing. Great Sage. Yi Zichen comforted the deities in the group, then put his phone away and placed it on the table. He looked towards the Great Sage and asked him a question. The Queen Mother had said she'd asked someone to send the Great Sage down to take a look. Naturally, he knew what was going on. Did you find anything when you went down? To be honest, I didn't find anything special. The Great Sage sat upright on a chair and said, When I, old son, went down, God of Thunder and Mother of Lightning were in the Sky Palace. However, their auras seemed to be on the verge of ascending. Almost all the old courtesans in the heavenly palace had disappeared. The ones in charge now were he used to be the servant of an old courtesan. How dense is the spiritual energy there? Asked Yi Zichen. One of the factors that affected the advancement of one's realm was one's own talent and comprehension of the Taoist laws of heaven and earth. The second factor was the density of the surrounding spiritual energy. Between the two, the latter was far superior to the former. If he was in an environment where the spiritual energy was very thin, then even if his talent was monstrous, he would not be able to make rapid progress. But in a place with dense spiritual energy, even a newborn baby could become an immortal. It was more appropriate to say that even the cleverest housewife couldn't cook without rice. Without spiritual energy, no matter how high one's talent was, it was useless. I don't feel any changes. The great sage rolled his eyes and thought for a while. The spiritual energy filtered by the ley line is still as pure as the divine mountains. It's not much more than the divine mountains. When I went down, I even went to Mount Huagua. In truth, the monkeys of Mount Huagua haven't decreased by much. Is that so? Yi Zichen narrowed his eyes. Mount Huagua was located in the Endless Beast region, in the same space as the Heavenly Court, the Underworld, and the Immortal region. Logically speaking, the people of the Heavenly Court, Underworld, and Immortal region absorbed the same spiritual energy as Mount Huagua. Countless immortals had ascended, but Mount Huagua hadn't changed at all. Did their cultivation increase greatly? Asked Yi Zichen. Not at all. The great sage suddenly glared at him. Because of this, I even got angry with the two commanders who've been following me all this time. Why is it that everyone else's cultivation levels are rising, but the children of Mount Flowerfruit haven't changed at all? That's really strange. Yi Zichen rubbed his chin, then looked up at Yang Jian. Yang Jian, go tell the Ocean Empress about this. Also, notify the other emperors in the group. Tell them to keep an eye out for any of our old friends from the Divine Mountain or the Yao race who have ascended to their realms. Also, tell Suiyun to keep an eye out for the lower realms. I'll notify Wei Jie and the others and tell Upheaval to be on the lookout. All right, I'll make the arrangements right away. Yang Jian nodded and left the room. The great sage spoke up at that moment. The great sage spoke up. Let me tell you, the situation in the Heavenly Court and Underworld is pretty bad. In truth, the Heavenly Court is a bit better off. The old courtesans all have servants. I went to the Underworld and found that the management of the 18 layers of hell is lax, and their cultivations aren't high. Even with their cultivation, the ghosts of the 15th layer and below can't intimidate them. As a result, the entire Underworld is filled with the wailing of vengeful ghosts. Son left 2 strands of monkey fur there to suppress them, but once they lose their effect, the Underworld will return to how it was before. Also, there have been more and more vengeful souls entering the Underworld recently. There were no infernal judges in hell, and the ghosts that had just descended were unable to make a fair judgment as to how many levels they should be allowed to enter. The internal corruption is also very serious. Old Son, personally saw a few little ghosts accept gifts from people. Evil and wicked people were directly put into the pool of reincarnation. Yi Zichen's expression darkened. He had never come into contact with the management of the Underworld, but he could feel the severity of the Underworld's problems from the great sage's words. The evil ghosts couldn't be suppressed, the internal corruption, and the management was broken. Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva and the other ghost kings aren't here? Yi Zichen frowned. There's no such thing as a ghost king. When Lai Sun, went down, the highest realm in the Underworld was a minor ghost king, a human immortal who hadn't even stepped into the sky immortal realm. I didn't see any of the other higher-ups, and it's the same for the Heavenly Court. However, the Heavenly Court still has the Queen Mother of the West, who can control the situation. Although the Queen Mother's cultivation is unfathomably high, she can't split herself into 2. Even if she wanted to manage the Underworld, she couldn't. Yeezy, if things continue like this, the Underworld and Heavenly Court really will fall apart. I understand now. In the end, it's all because of a lack of management. Pu Jingwan, who'd been silent all this time, suddenly spoke up. She'd been traveling the outside world for a long time, but as the saying goes, the onlooker sees the game more clearly than the person directly involved. Chapter 1587. They'd provide the Underworld with management. When he saw Pu Jingwan's relaxed expression, Yi Zichen couldn't help but narrow his eyes, mulling over what she'd just said. whether it was the heavenly palace or the underworld. Their hundreds of thousands of years of history and inheritance made internal management incredibly complicated. Even heavenly soldiers and infernum soldiers who'd been there for thousands of years didn't understand much about internal management. If anyone else went there, they'd be even more flustered. "Tell me more," said Yizichin. "Wah, no way. Didn't I make myself clear enough?" Pu Jingwan's jaw dropped dramatically. She looked at Yizichin like he was an idiot and shook her head. "I already said that the underworld and heavenly palace lack management, so we'll provide them with management. What else do you want me to say?" "But do you know their history?" Yizichin furrowed his brows. "Is this the time to worry about history?" Pu Jingwan shrugged. "The underworld and heavenly palace are about to collapse. The monkey also said that the underworld can't control those vengeful spirits. All we need to do is provide them with experts. That way they'll be able to intimidate the evil ghosts. Also, find a judge. Wouldn't everything be resolved by sending someone with a righteous outlook to hell, and sending someone with a righteous outlook to hell?" Yizichin and the great sage couldn't help but look at each other for a long while. None of them had considered such a simple principle. Ever since they'd learned that the underworld and heavenly palace were about to collapse, they'd been led astray. How could they manage them? The underworld and heavenly palace naturally had more ways than they could handle, but desperate times called for desperate measures. Their central hub was about to collapse, so they didn't need to pay attention to so many details. They could just send people to suppress them by force. Although this wasn't the best solution, it was the simplest and most effective. As for the specifics, don't you have a queen mother in your group? Once the dust settles, or at least stabilizes a bit, you can just send her to teach them. Pu Jingwan was worried that Yizichin wouldn't understand her, so she explained. Yizichin had no choice but to admit that Pu Jingwan's words were like a bucket of wisdom. Just like what she said, they would suppress the riots and internal corruption at the beginning, and then hand over the details to the Queen Mother to teach them. This was the best way to deal with the Queen Mother, who was working day by day, and the heavenly palace and the underworld. Of course, he also needed to get the approval of the Queen Mother to send people over. No matter what, the underworld and the heavenly palace were not under his jurisdiction. Even though he had the position of the chief steward of the heavenly palace before, the people he was going to send now were all his people. They'd all be in charge. It was no exaggeration to say that if this were to happen, the underworld and the heavenly palace could almost be said to have the surname Yi. He naturally had to get the Queen Mother's approval before he could do this. The problem was pressing, so Yizichin didn't hesitate. He immediately contacted the Queen Mother and sent her a message. As soon as the message was sent, the other party was typing in the chat box. "Emperor Yi, how may I help you?" A line of text appeared behind the Queen Mother's portrait. Yizichin organized his words, then explained Pu Jingwan's entire plan to the Queen Mother. After a while, the Queen Mother of the West did not reply to him. "Looks like the Queen Mother is having a hard time making a decision." The great sage stretched out his head and looked at the chat box, which had yet to receive a reply. He sighed softly. "If our people go over, although the paralysis of the underworld and the heavenly palace might ease up, would the heavenly palace and the underworld really be the same? The Queen Mother wants her to think about it. Our people will be in charge of the management, and she will become dispensable as a commander." "I know that." Yizichin had already anticipated this outcome when he told the Queen Mother all this. The Mother of the West would naturally have second thoughts. The upheaval alliance had completely taken over the management of the heavenly palace and the underworld. All Yizichin had to do was wave his arm, and if he didn't completely control the heavenly palace and the underworld, he'd at least control 90% of them. Even though the heavenly palace and the underworld were in dire straits, she still needed to think about it. At this moment, the other party was typing again in the dialogue box. Not long after, Queen Mother Wang sent another message. Emperor Yi, please give me some time to consider. All right. Queen Mother of the West can give me an answer after you consider it. If there are any changes, please contact me immediately. I will come up with countermeasures immediately. That was the end of his conversation with the Queen Mother. Even so, Yi Zichen still managed to contact Wei Jie. He wanted Wei Jie to hurry up and pick out experts from the Upheaval Alliance with excellent characters, moral values, and cultivation levels between Sky Immortals and Immortal Kings. Regardless of whether the Queen Mother agreed or not, he had to plan ahead. If she rejected him, at most, he'd just have them return to their posts and continue their lives in the God Realm. If she agreed, he could transfer them to positions in the Underworld and Heavenly Palace as quickly as possible. That way, the Heavenly Palace and Underworld would start operating again. I can't get away right now. If possible, I really want to see what's going on. Why did so many of the Heavenly Palace and Underworld's management suddenly ascend? Yi Zichen sighed. With such a large-scale ascension, anyone who saw it would be able to sense that something was amiss. Especially since they were all managers of the Heavenly Palace and Underworld. That's right. The Queen Mother had mentioned that quite a few experts from the Endless Beast region and Immortal region had ascended as well. If that was the case, could it be that everyone who'd ascended had come into contact with Yi Zichen? Those who had nothing to do with Yi Zichen, such as the great sage's descendants of Mount Huagua, hadn't experienced any sudden changes in their cultivation. Was someone pulling the strings behind the scenes? As soon as the thought occurred to him, Yi Zichen couldn't erase it from his mind. After all, even if they really did reach the point of ascension, they'd have half a year to prepare. During that time, the Heavenly Palace and Underworld's ascenders would have more than enough time to pick someone to replace them. But the current ruler was the Queen Mother. It was more like she'd been forced to become the Commander-in-Chief of the Three Realms. The others hadn't made any arrangements, either. They'd just been forced to ascend to the upper Three Realms. What exactly was this person planning? Or perhaps it wasn't because of Yi Zichen at all. Did the mastermind simply want to plunge the lower Three Realms into chaos and cause them to lose experts? But if experts of that level existed, what was there in the lower Three Realms that was worth it? If so many people ascended, then even if he wanted the ley line, couldn't he just steal it? Even if the lower Three Realms had masters of the laws, they couldn't do anything to him. Chapter 1588. The Outside? Yang Jian's frantic expression made Yi Zichen and the others shudder involuntarily. The outside he spoke of naturally referred to the First Era, which had already transcended. In the past, Yi Zichen had only interacted with the First Era in secret. Zuomo and Xiao Yumei were in charge of all resources, and the First Era had made it clear that they didn't want too many people to know about their relationship. But now, the outsiders had brazenly sought out the northern Divine Mountains Sea of Innocence. Are you sure they're really from the First Era? The outsiders' sudden visit forced Yi Zichen to be on high alert. No one could be certain that they weren't outsiders. They just said they were from the First Era, but in reality they were plotting something else. They are indeed from the First Era, said Yang Jian confidently. I've already confirmed their identities. They're currently in the Sea of Innocence. Don't worry too much. Hurry up and come with me. Yi Zichen couldn't help but frown. Yang Jian had spent a lot of time in the outside, so he trusted Yang Jian's judgment. But this urgency, had something happened to them? When he considered this, Yi Zichen put away his phone and turned to Yang Jian. Let's go take a look. The Sea of Innocence. Pitch-black figures floated above the boundless ocean. From the looks of it, there were at least 1 million of them. The Sea Emperor, Shuiyang, wielded the Sea God's scepter and stood in front of a city. Not long ago, he'd sensed the arrival of 1 million powerful auras, so he immediately stopped what he was doing and led the clan elders out of the palace. When he left the city, he saw a swarm of figures hovering in the sky like locusts. During this period of time, He had tried to inquire about the identity and intentions of the people who had come, but the people standing at the very front, who seemed to be the leaders, did not respond at all. Although they'd crossed the Sea of Innocence's boundaries, there were many of them, and many of them were experts. Before he fully understood their intentions, the Sea Emperor wouldn't act rashly. Besides, he had far too few people with him. He'd need to send the clan's elite forces. At the same time, judging from their appearances, they weren't here to attack the Sea of Innocence. Even if they wanted to attack, they'd have to heal first. Yes, the people who had appeared in the Sea of Innocence were all heavily injured, and their auras were weak. Their leaders were providing the injured with healing pills. To be honest, if it weren't for their own realms, they would have died a long time ago with their injuries. Swish, swish, swish. The sound of swords piercing through the air rang out like rain. The people circling the sea sensed the incoming danger. They all stopped and looked in the direction of Without Embroiling City. At that moment, countless experts with surging auras flew over from Without Embroiling City. These people were the elites of Without Embroiling City's clans, as well as the experts of the Sacred Lands Shui family. Ocean Empress. Several Without Embroiling City family heads hurried to Shui Yang's side, their gazes grave as they stared at the experts of unknown origins. With just a slight probe, the faces of the patriarchs turned cold. The auras of these 1,000,000 experts were all at the sovereign realm. However, their injuries were severe, and their auras were somewhat weak. They couldn't help but be shocked. Just what kind of power could nurture so many experts? What had they gone through to inflict such severe injuries on millions of sovereigns? Family head, should we call more people over? Asked one of the Shui family's direct descendants. Even if they're injured, we might not necessarily be able to take advantage of them. Don't. Shui Yang shook his head. They don't seem like they're here to cause trouble. Ocean Empress, don't attack. They're on our side. At that moment, Yi Zichen, Yang Jian, the great sage, Pu Jingwan, and a few others flew over. The Shui family members were familiar with Yi Zichen, and the family heads of Without Embroiling City had heard of him as well. The Ocean Empress turned to look at him. Are these people here for alliance, head Yi? They're probably supremes. At that moment, Goddess Zixia ran over to the great sage's side from within the city. Yi Zichen glanced at them and smiled knowingly, then his expression froze. He stepped forward and nodded. They're probably here for me. Ocean Empress, tell the others to return. These people won't attack the Sea of Innocence. The Ocean Empress waved her hand, and the other factions and Shui family members who'd rushed over hurriedly returned to Without Embroiling City. Yi Zichen watched them leave, then walked over to the experts in the sea. I'm Yi Zichen. Who's in charge here? You're Yi Xing. Alliance head? As soon as Yi Zichen said that, the eyes of the strongest expert, the one-armed man, lit up. He instinctively wanted to say, Master of the Stars, but when he saw Yi Zichen's frown, he remembered that this wasn't the first era, and he couldn't reveal the third era's Master of the Stars, so he hurriedly changed his mind. Address him. Fortunately, he was quick-witted. Although this was the Ocean Empress's territory, there were too many people around. But there were too many eyes. No one could be sure that the Star Lord wouldn't be teleported outside after being called out by him. Yi Zichen nodded, then glanced at the man's bleeding arm. He instantly appeared in front of him, sealed the acupoints around his arm, then took out a pill from his spatial ring and fed it to the man. Thank you for your concern, Alliance head Yi. The one-armed expert grinned. These are just minor injuries. Please, Alliance head Yi, find a place for my brothers to rest. Their injuries are far more serious than mine. Only then did Yi Zichen notice. Nearly 1,000,000 rulers were present, and not a single one of them was unscathed. Some had broken arms, some were blind, some had broken legs. Some had holes in their chests and abdomens. With a wave of his hand, Yi Zichen took out the Yao Ceiling Pagoda. The towering black tower towered over the sea. Let's go in. Jingwan, contact the Hermit Emperor and send some doctors over. Ocean Empress, lend me the city's current doctors as well. Have them enter the Yao Ceiling Pagoda as soon as possible. The outsiders' experts all entered the pagoda. Pu Jingwan and the Ocean Empress contacted the doctors, while Yi Zichen left the great sage to stand guard. Yi Zichen and Yang Jian followed them into the pagoda. 1,000,000 experts sat cross-legged on the grassy plains of the Yao Ceiling Pagoda. Yi Zichen stared blankly at them. Thud. At that moment, the one-armed expert knelt to the ground. Star Lord Yi, we've finally found you. Hurry up and get up. What exactly happened in the First Era? How did you get so badly injured? Yi Zichen furrowed his brows. The First Era is gone, cried the one-armed expert. Chapter 1589. The Misty Realm. In this luxurious palace, the young man on the throne rested his chin on his left hand. His fair and slender hand held an exquisite crystal goblet, swirling the bright red liquid in the goblet. There were also 6 maids standing beside him, either massaging his legs or massaging his shoulders. Lord Yale. A middle-aged man with a white beard walked into the palace. After taking a few steps into the palace, he knelt on the ground, put his hands on his head, and gently kowtowed on the red-carpeted floor. He wore a purplish-red silk robe, and his golden eyes were filled with respect and devotion for this young man. The young man on the throne was Yale. As for the maid beside him, the maid sent by the war goddess was no longer serving him in the palace. Even though the middle-aged man had knelt and kowtowed for a while, Yale still acted as if he didn't see it. He shook the red liquid in his goblet, and his eyes kept on watching the liquid scraping against the wall of the goblet, slowly flowing down the wall, and gathering in the liquid at the bottom of the goblet. After shaking it for a long time, he didn't taste the liquid in the goblet. Instead, he gently placed it on the tray in the hands of the maid beside him. "You're back." A faint whisper came from all directions of the palace. Only then did the middle-aged man who was kowtowing on the ground raise his head to look at Yale, his eyes full of reverence. "Yes, Lord Yale. What you're about to tell me will be a good result, right?" Yale pursed his lips in a demonic smile. This subordinate isn't sure if it's a good result for Lord Yale. The middle-aged man on the ground hesitated for a moment, then licked his lips and pinched the corner of his clothes. "According to your orders, the First Era has completely fallen. Everything related to the First Era had been destroyed, never to be found. Nothing remains. There are still some people inside who are stubbornly resisting, but they can't change the outcome of their destruction." "You're quite efficient." Yale nodded. "At least it sounds like good news. So, is there anything else you want to say?" But the middle-aged man wanted to say something but stopped. Yale narrowed his eyes and smiled sinisterly. "You should know that I hate it when people only say half of what they want to say." In an instant, the middle-aged man broke out in cold sweat uncontrollably. In just a few breaths of time, his purplish-red robe was already soaked in sweat. His hands also soaked the red blanket. The violent heartbeat was very clear in this quiet palace. Yale also silently looked at this middle-aged man. "On account of your contribution in conquering the First Era, this king will consider it as you making amends for your mistakes and spare your life." "Thank you, Lord Yale, for not killing me." The middle-aged man banged his head on the blanket. Yale's gaze suddenly turned cold. He raised his finger and a strand of divine power fell in front of the middle-aged man. The pupils of the middle-aged man who was kowtowing suddenly shrank, and the head that was about to fall froze in midair. He stared at the finger-thick black hole in front of him. "You've been with this king for the longest time. Don't tell me you still haven't figured out what this king likes and doesn't like? I'll spare your life, so continue to say what you need to say. Don't waste time on these things. You must know that your time is very precious, and so is this king's time." Yale stretched his neck and looked at the middle-aged man deeply. From the middle-aged man's eyes, it could be seen that he was completely immersed in fear, almost scared out of his wits. When Yale's voice fell, He leaned back on the chair again. He didn't dare to have the slightest hesitation. He swallowed a few mouthfuls of saliva and said, "However, the Star Master of the First Era appeared for some reason and sent their elites to the Third Era. There are about 1,000,000 of them. I sent people to intercept them, but they didn't." "Oh? Is that so?" Yale gently raised his eyebrows and smiled. "This is quite interesting. 1,000,000. What level of elites are they?" "Most of them are at the celestial level, and a few are at the supreme level." The middle-aged man hesitated, worried that Yale would blame him for this matter. He hurriedly said to remedy the situation, "Although these people ran to the First Era, they are all seriously injured. Even if they want to recover, they will leave behind chronic diseases. Their strength is not as good as before." "That's because you think too simply." Yale indifferently smiled, stretched his body, and motioned for the maids around him to move away. He snorted and said, "In the Third Era, there is a divine doctor. As long as people don't die, he can cure them. Moreover, think about it carefully. When the First Era was destroyed, did you get the resources of the First Era?" "I didn't get it." The middle-aged man's face turned serious. "If I got it, I would definitely offer it to you, Lord Yale. I really— All right, I didn't say that you embezzled." Yale still had that evil smile on his face. His eyebrows were lowered as he gently looked at the misty realm outside the hall. "I'm just telling you that these resources are likely to have been transferred to the Third Era in advance. Or, the resources are in the hands of one of the 1,000,000 people who were sent out." This. The middle-aged man was stunned. "It seems that the First Era has completely given up resistance and wants to pin their hopes on the Third Era. Otherwise, they wouldn't be so desperate. It seems that they are very confident in the Third Era." Interesting. "Lord, it's all my fault." The middle-aged man hurriedly apologized. He thought that Yale was in a state of anger, but he didn't expect Yale to just smile and shake his head at him. "It has nothing to do with you." Even though Yale said it with a smile, he still felt a little grim in his heart. The First Era had existed in the world for too long. Its internal foundation could be said to be rich to the point that even he felt envious. If such resources were handed over to the Third Era, the overall strength of the Third Era would increase by several times. This would make it more difficult for them to attack the Third Era. However, Yale was somewhat glad that the First Era and Third Era had fused. After all, it was a game. It would only be interesting if there was some challenge and difficulty. If they had directly attacked the Third Era, wouldn't this long wait be too cheap? It was because it was too boring that he destroyed the Fiend clan when he ascended to the throne. After that, he waited until he was bored to death. With great difficulty, he was finally able to attack the Third Era. He hoped that the Third Era could properly entertain him and let him enjoy himself. Isn't this more fun? Just let the two eras fuse. This king can still destroy them without leaving a trace of their existence. Yale's eyes sank. At this moment, the middle-aged man also spoke. "Lord Yale, actually. This subordinate also captured a few people from the First Era." "What?